Yep, Jerry's getting coffee. Hey, Karen, thanks for hanging out. So we can open it up first to questions. So this is just basic review, I guess. This is T, the complete practice. We've gone full steam into what we're calling basic alignment, which is the first little section of this practice. And oh no, bring that back. But so far, I'll have the arrow drawing this way. So we're in basic alignment. Out of the 4 sections here, these are the 4 different sections for the complete practice. The 5th section is the optional one that you'll be hearing more and more and more and more about, because this is my creative expression that I call hydrostasy, but it's a separate thing based on everything T, but just a subtle difference, because with hydrostasy, I will tell you exactly what needs to be done for that effect, for that particular effect. And then we'll see if we can recreate it. If not, hey, I'll be 110 with this hydrostasy practice and, you know, living my best life, but I'm sure willing to offer it if somebody is able to find value. So are there any questions about the first 2 sections of basic alignment, the 4 corners and foundational practices? Any questions about this before we dive into the new section of the basic alignment? Questions, comments, concerns, anything about anything? Yes, Gene, can I clarify anything for you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where I find myself most of the time. So I'm comfortable with that, and I'm beginning to remember more. So I'm anxious to look forward.
Lauren, Karen, Jerry, how are you? Any questions about what we've talked about so far? So we're going to be adding a lot. I'm not going to foreshadow too much, but we're still going to continue once a week. We're going to outline this T complete practice between now and the end of the year. That's the thing we're doing in 2021. We may see a whole bunch other things, but we'll keep at this. We'll develop this very thoroughly. So if you stick with us, you may not do the Seers training, but you'll still get an introduction to it by the end of the year. So then you can just decide when you feel like that atrophy effect is dissolved, and then you're in it, you're doing it.
I think it's a great idea, Ernest, because like you said, it keeps going throughout the year in your mind, and it really sticks instead of, oh, well, it was this, I remember this part, but what was in between, and then what was that other one? So I think that's a great idea, and since you're introducing new things as well, so that's great.
Yep.
And then I'll have an outline that if I'm motivated and someone's interested, I could share, instead of trying to remember and the order, and this way at least I'll present it in the way it was presented to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and then hydrostasy, you know, I'm taking a little bit from old school and like the old ways of teaching and learning with some new things too. So that's going to be really similar, Gene. So the T complete practice, it has an outline. It can easily be explained, and it's very organized and focused. Hydrostasy will be the exact same thing, but it's kind of follow along. So it's kind of telling you what you can go do. And that's just the subtle difference between T and hydrostasy. Hydrostasy is exactly what I've done. T is the principles around it so that you can make it malleable to you. So T is not prescribing behavior. It's making recommendations, perhaps, which is the, you know, so if we look at this, these are really recommendations, the foundational practices. I'm not telling you that you have to do these things. I'm just making them available. But for the hydrostatic effect, that will be a little bit different. If you really want to feel that effect of balance, I think tricks of attention, they have to be balanced.
And what does that mean again, Ernest? I hate to ask. I haven't been here. Or is it alone, or you want to wait?
Well, it doesn't matter. I pretty much made it up.
Oh, yeah, that much I know.
Yeah.
It'll
Well,
be in the mainstream soon.
how I'm using the word I have made up, but you can think of it this way. Bruce Lee basically stole from the Tao Te Ching to be like water. And now it's attested to Bruce Lee. It's Bruce Lee said to be like water. Well, Bruce Lee forgot to say that this was a quote from the Tao Te Ching. So the Tao Te Ching says to be like water, to move like water, to behave like water. And a lot of times in the tea practice, we do address water. Like we talk about things like we would the flow of water. Adding resistance is dirt, and then we have mud. So we use the equation P1 times P2 and all of that. So hydrostatic is essentially, so the word hydrostatic equilibrium is another word for balance. But it's a balance we can see. We can observe it in the sun. We can observe it in our own atmosphere. And I have observed it as a feeling of balance, a feeling of multi-dimensional, multi-rotational, things moving fluidly, but there is this sustained type of balance. And I call that the hydrostasy bubble. It can all be felt though. The hydrostasy practice towards the later stages is all just feeling. I'm just creating words to describe how this effect of what does balance feel like. And so that's kind of what hydrostasy is hoping to illustrate.
Oh, okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Sure. All right.
Yeah,
So are we ready?
good.
Yes, Karen, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, even that, just thinking of that sounds good. I'm thinking like rigid, being rigid as to going to flowing. It just felt good for a moment.
Now, the weird thing is, Gene, we did start there. We all started there. We were born into this world feeling the hydrostatic effect, and yeah, we went away from it.
We didn't start there deliberately. We were born into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we muddied it up. And then we muddied it up.
Yep. Once upon a time, the human species found itself at the top of the food chain. And rather than evolving further, we decided to declare war on our own mind. And then that meant that we started to declare war on one another. And that has been the last 10,000 years of human history. So we have to reverse engineer that shit if we're going to continue to evolve.
It seems we fell in love with what we believe to be our superiority or our difference between everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so we focused, it seems to me that we focused in that direction and lost sight of the rest.
In some ways, but then not in others. It's weird because why didn't we focus on humor? Humor is definitely something, it's a characteristic that seems almost unique. Almost. I think we've seen some hints of humor, like dolphins, they do things and then you see them making this cackling sound. It's like, okay, they could be laughing. Like, I don't know for sure, perception of the hawk, but that sure seems similar. But it seems like the human species, it just shows thinking in words to grasp onto. And then we called that logic and reason and deduction and higher learning and higher reasoning. But what about imagination? What about our sense of humor? What about our ability to adapt and respond to situations and flow? We didn't grasp onto the entire human experience. We just chose this little piece of it and then declared ourselves verbally superior, conquistadors and everything else. So the last 10,000 years has been essentially the human being kicking themselves and each other in the face rather than evolving. And I don't talk about this often. This might be in the book, if I do decide to write this as a book, but Modern Metaphysical Enslavement. We are in a form of de-evolution. The human species is de-evolving. We are not adaptable. Our DNA is beginning to break down. We're finding ourselves with the same common ailments that overpopulation of cattle would see or overpopulation of deer would see. So a lot of what's occurring in the human species today is a direct result of kicking ourselves in the face psychologically, which has led to kicking ourselves in the DNA. So the human mind and the human being and the human species, yeah, we got some work to do. if we're going to get things back on track and we're going to evolve beyond the death of our own sun or the life cycle of our own sun. So if the human species is going to survive that event, we got some work to do. And by work, I don't mean that literally per se, because this practice is not work, it's just attention. So, hey, Ida, what's new with you? We're about to get into the topic of the week, but we're just doing a little bit of review. So this is what we got so far. We've talked about basic alignment. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, well, that's true. We have talked about basic alignment. And so we've talked about the nature of attention, because that's critical for this practice. We got to know what are we doing? Well, this practice fundamentally involves the nature of attention. Furthermore, deliberate attention, which is the tricks of attention. And then the golden mean principle, the principle of balance, is at the forefront of every single thing T. So it needs to be discussed. And then the act of allowing. This is what makes T different. T is never trying to control. T is not cognitive behavioral therapy. We're not isolating behaviors and then isolating individual forms of cognition. So basically, we're not looking at the branches of the tree and trying to address individual branches. We're going straight to the root. We're going to the base of the suffering, which is attention that is a leaf at the mercy of the wind. That's the base of the psychological suffering. The only reason we would exist in an extreme is because we are unconscious. We're doing it unconsciously. We're not aware of what's occurring. So the act of allowing is one of the unique aspects of the transcendental embodiment approach. Now, am I prepared to say that it's completely unique? Of course not, because principle of the hawk, there's 7 billion people on Earth. There's probably some group that's doing something maybe somewhat similar to what we're doing. I don't know, and I don't care really. Well, I guess I care in an abstract way, but I'm not going to give it my cognition now. So does that make sense? That's what we've talked about so far. Any questions about these first four, the four corners? From that, we can start to build the 3 pillars. I know, a bunch of numbers and phrases to remember. We have the 4 factors of embodiment. We have the 4 destroyers. We have the rule of 3. Believe me, when this is all on paper, it will actually help you remember having it categorized like this. Any questions about any of that? Mike, what's your question about the act of allowing? I know you got one. Just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding, but you don't have to answer. Okay. So from the philosophy, because that's what this is talking. That's okay. We're so used to talking and using words, it's fine. But essentially, that's what this 4 corners is. This is philosophy. This is talking about things. That's okay. Foundational practice is not. This is not just talk. This is not just fancy wordplay. This is not just ideology. This is something you can do. Walking mindfully, sitting mindfully, standing mindfully, laying down mindfully, and transitioning between all of those mindfully. Did anybody take any time to drive deliberately when you were driving recently? Jean says yes. Ida says yes.
And also
Cool.
today I put my mind on, I don't know if this is a thing or not, on just on deliberate itself, on the deliberation of deliberateness, if you know what I mean. I put my attention on deliberateness, on doing things deliberately and feeling the deliberateness of the deliberate thing, if that makes sense. It does to me.
It does actually make sense to me, yes. Believe it or not, that does actually make sense to me. And if that is not feeling like work, you're getting very close to what I would call seer's training. Does that make sense? So if Ida is focusing on the feeling of deliberate nature, that feeling itself can become a point of attention. I just don't recommend starting with that kind of stuff because you could find yourself just hustling yourself. which is a common error in this practice. That will be another section. We will talk about common errors, but not yet. But it doesn't make sense to begin with common errors.
So deciding to do something deliberate, and then feeling how that feels is kind of where I'm going with that. It's quite simple.
Yeah,
really.
no, I don't.
You know, just
It is.
decide to do a certain amount of things before a certain time, doing it and feeling the feeling of doing it. I suppose it's kind of hunting power, is it?
It is. What you just
Yeah.
described is hunting power. Yeah. And I'm not going to chastise you for that. That's your choice. The only thing about hunting power is it can flirt with exercising force and trying to control. But that's a slippery slope. And that will also be auxiliary training. Hydrostasy and hunting power will be also visions of power, things like that. That's not T proper, because I don't know if I can teach that.
I feel
Yeah.
what I'm doing really is just making myself feel better rather than overthinking all day long, you know, about whatever's going on. Filling
Yeah.
up those corners of my day with deliberate things and feeling the nice feeling of the deliberateness rather
Mhm.
than going to the thinking side of things. And
And the
then
thing about,
when you feel the nice side of deliberateness and you feel the feeling of flow and what you've managed to get done without thinking about it, it kind of feels even more
mhm.
like a different day. It just feels like a different feeling, a good feeling.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. So now that does actually make a lot of sense to me, what Ida's saying. And that's okay though, if right now, that you don't have any contextual experience for that, I get it, but so what Ida's starting to talk about now, is definitely what I would associate with this practice in terms of it's not destination oriented. Whatever Ida is talking about, she will have to continue to do something to manifest that. Does that make sense? So the difference here is that Ida has not arrived. She is not there. She has not reached this stage where now she no longer practices. No, this is not a destination practice. This is a practice until we're 110. So what Ida is talking about will need to be sustained with the practice itself. Keep doing it. Yeah, so I love what Ida's saying. And then that's the only thing I would add is that for those who don't have a contextual reference quite yet for what she's describing, then, that's fine. And Ida isn't, she hasn't leveled up. No offense, it might feel that way sometimes and that's dope, but actually, I'll rephrase that, excuse me. But in terms of this practice and how it relates to what Ida's saying, if Ida wants to continue that, if Ida wants to expand on that, if Ida wants that to continue to grow in her experience, then yeah, she will have to continue to do it. Lauren, when I talk about hunting, I'm talking about intention and will. So if you decided today I'm going to do 100 push-ups at every 15 minutes of the hour. So every time the clock is on 3, 6, 9, and 12, you're going to do 50 push-ups. You intend to do it, you follow through with it, you get a feeling from that we call personal power. Hunting is focusing on that feeling, cultivating that feeling, and continuing to do acts that produce that feeling. However, if somebody attempts to do that too early in this practice, that is definitely going to be a form of attempting to control. So I don't recommend it. I mean, there might come a time where I feel, where someone's asking the right questions and we'll talk more about it. I myself do not hunt power. So I'm pretty much dedicated to non-resistance and the act of allowing. But don't let me float your boat. If Jerry finds out that, she has a biological condition that she wants to dissolve, hunting personal power will be the way to dissolve that without external circumstances. Personal power is the key to all of that. Physical healing, if you want to fly, like physically, you just want to take off and fly through the air like Superman. The accumulation of intention and will, personal power, the belief that you can do it as a knowing, that's all conscious creation, law of attraction. It's all there. But yeah. I do this practice for peace and everything that comes from peace naturally. I'm not necessarily hunting personal power. Unless I find out I have stage 3 or 4 lung cancer, and then maybe I will, because I don't want to die. And is that force? Maybe, and that's my garden to tend to, not yours. So that's why I don't judge you if you decide to when I teach this, if I show this, then that's completely up to you. And Shana, it will look a lot like Anthony Robbins' personal power videos. But that's why I don't really go there. But that's what it would start to really resemble. But that's not the tea practice, so I digress. Yes, Gene, did you have a comment?
No. I was just going to say that gaining personal power and hunting for such a thing as curing cancer or removing it or whatever is, it doesn't have to be push-ups every 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be forced. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be grit. It doesn't have to be any of that. It can be a peaceful approach. It can be done peacefully, is what I'm saying, without force, just with attention.
That would be tea. That would be tea. Yeah. So you're exactly right, though, Gene, because if you're choosing where your attention is right now, which is all tea is really, is where is your attention and did you put it there? Is that not an act of intention and will? Well, of course it is. So you're still gaining personal power through the tea practice, of course. But maybe for some reason you feel you need to step that up a notch for whatever reason. I'm not your judge. You know, maybe you want to transdimensionally portal to Alpha Centauri to do all of that. Fine. I'm not going to tell you otherwise, but you know, you may need more than just your attention for that. I don't know. I've never done it, so who am I to say? And then we start to get into the practical aspect of basic alignment, which is the practices: deliberate driving, a deliberate beverage. Those 4 things, I would be very surprised if you hadn't done all of this, if that makes sense. So a hunter wouldn't have hydrostasy. Maybe, you know, so the hydrostasy practice could exist independently. The hydrostasy practice is, it could start to resemble hunting power because I'm telling you what to do. I would say to keep it internal and external at all times for the hydrostatic effect to occur. So if Jerry starts to do that hydrostasy practice, in some senses that could be a form of hunting power. But hydrostasy, again, is like tea in that it is only really attention. Well, no, there's a couple aspects that's not just attention. Yeah, there's some physical, but it all comes from the mind that is already at peace. So then, like Gene said, when you're already at peace, everything that's after that is you're not going to have resistance to it. So it's just an act that is intention and will. Yeah. So those two would actually, hydrostasy and hunting power could be completely independent of one another. Does that make sense? Maybe not as much because I haven't really delivered those two yet. But the bottom line is, you know, if we're not doing the basic practices, then, I mean, I don't know where you're starting at with your hydrostasy or your hunting. You see what I mean? Or the hunting practice. But the hunting is accidentally done by people in the world too. So this is something that the common mind can do, and they do it. So, and it doesn't necessarily equal peace, not necessarily. You could actually find yourself attempting to control and manipulate. That's why it's a very slippery slope. And maybe it's completely unnecessary to you because, like Gene just pointed out, intention and will itself builds personal power. So I'm still doing it right now. I'm just not focusing on personal power. I'm not just focusing on that. If I were to do that, it would be a different boat.
Practice, yeah. Sorry, that's where the tea practice comes in, because you can feel the difference. When I used to hunt power and do all the things, and I had no peace while doing that. You know, in the past, I had no peace. I could accomplish great things, but I had no peace in it. Where now, the peace is part of it. Like
Right.
it's it really. It's what I'm. I was going to say it's what I'm hunting is the peace.
I'm okay with that.
In a
Stalking
way,
peace.
in a way, you know.
Just a way of talking about it. Sure. I would say though that somebody who is practicing hydrostasy probably won't need to hunt power. I want to say probably because we just never know. You know, maybe I don't know. I don't know everybody's interests and you know what's going on in their lives that they would want to do that. But in theory, according to principles, it's occurring in the world in the island of the practical, and it is possible. So, but now we're starting to move on, and T has a principle that involves balance, absolutely. And you could actually start to violate that principle with hunting power. You could start to violate the principle of balance, and that will equal suffering. It will. So too much focus on hunting power could be very unbeneficial. Or it could cure your stage 4 cancer, and then you just go back to your practice. You see what I mean? So but I would never want to tell a person to not do that. So if somebody says, Ernest, you know, I'm dying, man, I got a month to live, I'm going to do some hunting, I'm going to say, go do it. You know, do whatever you want to do or whatever you think you need to do to preserve your physical existence. You know, that's fine with me. I'm not going to judge. But I personally don't have any need to do that right now. So I just stick with the hydrostatic effect.
I have a quick example.
Okay.
That might be helpful. I don't know. When I had lung cancer, I thought about destroying cancerous cells. And I did a meditation that involved going through my body and destroying cancerous cells while the doctors were doing whatever they were doing. That was one version. And then when I had prostate cancer, I had a little bit of tea. And instead of trying to kill cells and doing my practice, I was trying to get all the cells to align for a common purpose. And I wasn't destroying anything. I was allowing what I thought. I was allowing my body to do what it needed to do to heal, whatever that meant in terms of alignment, getting the cells to align. So I wasn't trying to kill anything or destroy anything because I didn't think I had enough understanding of how it all worked. So I let my body take care of it by getting cells to align to their purpose, whatever their purpose was. Anyway, it's just a different way to look at it, I think.
That makes sense to me. It really does. And then to answer Jerry's question, yeah, you could, if you're practicing T, you could hunt power and still have peace. Yes, it is possible. But if we're not practicing our practice already, like that's not going to happen. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but if we're not even remember deliberate driving, you're not checking in, you're not rule of threeing, you're not redirecting, you can forget about hunting power because it's not going to be what I'm talking about. It's going to be what the world is doing. And they get an imbalance of focus in one area that has detrimental effects to other areas. And, you know, yeah, in one area, there's a lot of energy flowing through, but then in other areas, there's complete lack and misalignment. So, yeah. All right. So, but again, before we can even talk about hunting power, like even before I would even mention it, there definitely has to be a strong base. Presence, mindfulness, and deliberate attention must be there. Like otherwise, we're not talking about the same thing. So I can tell you, Jerry, let's say that your practice, and I'll tell you this real quick and then we'll go into this week's topic. But let's say, for example, Jerry, you are, what's a really good way to explain this? Let's say that you are practicing your T practice, and that's what we're really going to get into next, is we're going to get into what are we actually doing? And we have talked about that, and that's great, but now we're really going to get into that so that it's very clear. But if I were to talk about hunting power with T, what it would look like is you are essentially creating opportunities for intention and will, like the 50 push-ups or whatever the hell, you know, you want to substitute in there. Does that make sense, Jerry? It could be anything. It could be running every day. It could be doing art every day at a certain time. You intend it, you do it, you accumulate personal power. If you're practicing T, you'll focus on that piece or that feeling of I can, which is what Ida was talking about. If you're not practicing T, you're going to get a result that I can't predict. I'm not a fortune teller, so I don't know what you'll create in that example. Does that make sense, Jerry? And then we can move on. Or if you have more questions, I guess. I'd prefer not to get too much into that topic.
Yeah,
right
no.
now, but yeah.
Yeah, it was just a comment. Sorry. Go ahead. Do it.
Mhm.
Your topic. You can get into the topic now. Sorry.
No, you're good. All right, so the T practice has been broken down into 4 basic categories. This is a complete practice. This practice could take somebody from severe psychological suffering to inner peace. And I'm not selling inner peace, but I can show and organize and describe a way that a person could do it if they wanted to. It's not the way, that's why I call it approach. It's the transcendental because we're fundamentally changing our cognition. We're not reprogramming. We're not going from one type of thinking to another type of thinking. It's not just positive thinking. It's not behavioral therapy. It is fundamentally re-evaluating the way that we interact with the world itself, with everything that is around us. And of course, that's what we talk about as we go into this. So we have basic alignment, which is not redirecting thought yet. So counterbalance is when a person has decided to embody mindfulness. Before that, it's not really embodiment theory yet. It's just, what are you talking about? Let me try some of this and let me see if I can do it myself. And then once a person starts to feel that peace that they're creating through the practice, then embodiment can occur. And then we have the 4 factors of embodiment, which that's another subject. But so we have basic alignment, which is where we're at so far this year. So we started in basic alignment. There's 13 topics, and then 13 topics in counterbalance, warrior training, and the seer's practice. And all of that will make sense if, you know, we continue to deliver it in this way. But we started with the nature of attention. And so these videos are on the website. And if you wanted to watch them in order, they're under video replay. The nature of attention. So we talked about that in great detail. What do we do with attention? That's tricks of attention. And we talked about that. Why are we doing anything with our attention? And that's the golden mean principle. We will never be able to observe the feeling of existing in an extreme as it's happening without paying attention to our own cognition, our own physicality, without paying attention to the present moment. Not just paying attention, but engaging. That's different. Similar, but different. And then the act of allowing. That's what's different than T and everything else that I personally have ever experienced. T is never trying to control because it only involves your attention. I am my attention. I have never had a moment of my life as an earnest, as a human, without attention. When I am dreaming, I am paying attention to the dream. When I'm thinking, I'm paying attention to my thought. Maybe when Jean's talking, hopefully I'm paying attention to Jean, but if not, I'm still paying attention to something. I have had moments without thinking. I have never had moments without attention itself. Unless I'm in a dreamless sleep, but then there's no time and I just wake up and, you know, there was no causality or observation of causality. So then there's no time. That's why sometimes if you're in a dreamless sleep, it feels like you've just closed your eyes and, 8 hours have passed. That's why we're not observing causality, so time doesn't exist to us. However, outside of that, even when we're in a dream, our attention is active. We are paying attention, the light of attention. So in that first week of class or group study where we talked about the nature of attention, we all agree the way that we talk about attention is directional. Jean, may I have your attention, please? And Karen, give me your attention. Shayna, pay attention. Jerry, may I have your attention? It's the way we talk about it because it's the way that it feels. So we're describing it. Where does it come from? The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. We can't even talk about it at that point. We know what it is. We are it, but there's not a whole lot of talking about attention. We're not going to be able to pinpoint it necessarily on an instrument, a device that maybe perceives heat. There's no heat that's emanating from attention. So our instruments right now are failing to basically isolate what it is, and they never will, because it is the it is. It's the fabric of the cosmos. When you say we are attention, is it a matter of how? So Jerry, so this is going to get to the fundamental nature of all things. The universe itself is one thing. So we love to talk about this. You know, this is they make great memes on Facebook, and we'll highlight this in the book when we read. Everything is just one thing. Well, we can talk that way. And when we want to actually feel that, it is attention itself. So attention is the fabric of the cosmos that's being funneled through the human brain. And I'll show you. So represents the fabric of the cosmos. When the fabric of the cosmos starts to coalesce, and it's multidimensional, so that's just how we're looking at it, we come up with matter. Does that make sense, Jerry? The fabric of the cosmos, and I can't talk much about the fabric of the cosmos. The Tao Te Ching, the very first thing it says is to not do that. Is give up trying to define the Tao. Give up trying to define the fabric itself. We don't have to define it because we are it. You can't step outside of it to observe it and define it because you are fundamentally it. Does that make sense, Jerry? Now, that fabric of the cosmos, little background sound there. Not sure where that came from. So, but that fabric of the cosmos is doing something right now. It is being funneled, or it is being focused through a lens. That is your brain. That is your body. That is your spirit. And the fabric of the cosmos is being focused through this lens that we call human cognition. And that creates human perception. And that creates the light of attention that can be directed with cognition and with the human mind. Does that make sense, Jerry? That's the best way that I can personally describe it. Now, if you want to know what this blue line is, I'm not going to do that. I'm not even going to try to do that because it detracts from the point anyway. That's, again, we're just trying to figure it out, which is just another attempt to control. I don't need to know what that blue line is, or at least I don't need to put it in words. I do know what it is, but there's no way really for me to find satisfactory wording to describe it other than Tao. And then we just say, stop, don't try to describe it further than that. You can, but it'll be very poetic and it will be very creative. And I can dig it, but it won't be an accurate representation of it, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Jerry? That's the best description I can give of how, and the good thing about this, Jerry, is that you can observe this for yourself. Your attention hasn't aged. From the day you were born until this very moment, your attention is the same attention. It's the same one attention. When I look into the eyes of a horse or an owl, sometimes even when I'm looking at an entire forest of trees, I can feel attention. I know that there's some sort of attention. And if there's attention, that could be an indication of some sort of cognition. In the horse, of course, I didn't even mean to do that. In the horse, of course, it has attention. So the horse we're very adept at recognizing what is similar to us. So we see the horse, we see its eyes, we know that it's looking and that it has attention, and our dog will say, hey, Neo, he looks at me when I say that. And we can see the similarity. So that's a similarity that the human being will have with the bird, with the insect, with the owl, with the everything else, is the nature of attention itself. So you don't have to take my word for it. When you are present and when you are mindful, you're not thinking and judging the present moment. The cognition, the words, which is a part of cognition. It's not all of our cognition. Perception is also a part of cognition. Inference is a part of cognition that doesn't require words. You can infer, you can deduce, you can do all of those things. Logic can occur without words. Every time that you have looked at a pothole and drove around it, you used working memory, muscle memory, and long-term memory of the last time you drove over a pothole, and you just whipped around it without thinking about it, without words occurring in your mind. Maybe I shouldn't drive over a pothole because and then you've already gone over it, right? So the idea here is that the nature of attention is the fabric of the cosmos. It's as close as the human being can get to the fabric of the cosmos itself. And some people have words for this. They may call it God, they may call it Tao, they may call it whatever they want to call it, source. You can call it anything you want to, really. Any name is going to just be a description of infinity. Even the word infinity is a description of something that we can't really put our hands around because the mind is wired binary. We just don't process that very well.
That was a question. I just didn't say it right in what I just typed. That was a question. What I just typed.
This is a part of T, dissolving the atrophy of awareness.
The point of
what?
T.
What?
That was a question. I meant that's the point of T. This is a question. And what we're doing, it all lines up with when you talk about the atrophy of awareness, construct, cognition, hunting power for the wrong reasons. It's to dissolve the atrophy. If we are attention, our T practice aligns us up better with balance with everything that already is around us, or getting back to that.
Yeah, and I would say that that's rather than T, the point of T is to dissolve that. No, that's just the derivative. That's just the virtue. That's something that's going to occur through this practice, whether you like it or not. You will dissolve the atrophy effect. So the point of T, if I was going to say that there's a point, and I'm not trying to sell this, but the point of T is inner peace, because peace is a mind that is not resisting the present moment. Peace is a mind that is not kicking itself in the face. Peace is a mind that is not judging, labeling, comparing, contrasting, trying to figure it out, trying to exercise control all of the time. So a mind that is at peace, love will flow naturally, connection will flow naturally. If I'm at peace, and I'm very specific about how I use the word peace, peace is a mind, and it's not necessarily that's not in thought. You can be in thought and still feel peace, but it's a mind that is in functional cognition. And by functional, I mean when thought occurs, it's not incessant, it's not a leaf at the mercy of the wind. It's usually creative, it's usually compassionate and caring, and it will have that kind of edge to the thought. It will come, it will go, or you can write it down, or you can entertain it. What you do with it, of course, is your choice. So peace, and that's the hydrostasy bubble. Remember, peace is in the middle, but I myself, I'm not stagnant in inner peace. No, it's because I feel peace, I can adapt. It's because I feel peace that when space junk falls from the sky and lands on my house, I don't, run out onto the lawn and put up my hands and why is this happening to me? No, I don't need to do any of that. So space junk will fall from the sky, will land on my house. I'll probably have an emotional reaction, and hopefully I still feel peace. I don't get too far from center, but I'm going to need to adapt to that. And that's another reason, Jerry, in T, there are no masters. There are no real teachers. There's nobody who's better. There's no leveling up, because I have to do my practice. So when space junk falls from the sky, if I forget my practice, I'll be a leaf at the mercy of the event. I'll respond and I won't even know what's occurring if I forget my practice. So the practice helps to get out of our own way. When we get out of our own way, peace is a feeling that occurs. And it's the feeling of balance. That's the hydrostasy effect. Does that make sense? And some of these words I have totally made up, but it will make sense down the road as we go.
Yes, I agree with everything you're saying. I guess right now I'm reconnecting it in maybe just a little bit different way. But you gave the example when we were all first getting here, and you were saying, I know you remember, you said, isn't it interesting that we didn't put our attention towards humor? But you were talking back, I don't know if it was caveman, I can't remember what your example was, but that's the atrophy. As we started to communicate with each other and create power structures and judgments, instead of being quiet with what we already were, we started jumping out and about and using our mind, because it is very busy, and we get to thinking and doing and creating stuff, but that's where the atrophy came in. We just
How should I don't know. Like, I
Well, I
wasn't
mean, it's a
there,
good
so I
example,
can't say for sure. What's that?
but I mean, it's a good example for
It makes
we
sense
just
to me, yeah.
got sideways.
So I can show you the illustration again. So I'll delete this one, which is, oh no, where did that go? Where did all my words go? Okay, there we go. So I'm going to take this. It did it again. Okay, so I'm just going to save this, and we'll just start over. So this is what's occurring. And this is the best way that I can show T as a practice, and everything else is an illustration. The first circle I'm going to draw is your brain, and your body, and your spirit. We'll just put all those together. Inside of this dark blue circle, Jerry, are your thoughts, are your likes, are your dislikes, is your memory, all of that. Does that make sense, Jerry? The dark blue dot or circle in this screen, that represents your brain, your spirit, your mind, you as Jerry.
That's the first ring. So to speak.
No, not necessarily. That would be all three rings, actually, if we talk about it in that perspective. But this is the carved block. Does that make sense, Jerry?
Yes.
This is the cup. We could call this the ego if we attach and cling to it. Now it's ego. If we start to identify with this blue dot as all we are, which has occurred, it's very common in the world today that we attach and we cling to the stories of our past and the aspirations of our futures and our desires. So the T practice is a practice of balance, not a practice of removal, denial, trying to control. That's not what this is. So I don't deny the power of language. I don't deny the carved block. Buddha had a carved block. We called him Buddha. That's his name. He had memories. He had a history. That is still the carved block, like it or not. He had a carved block. He was skinny, didn't eat a lot. That's his carved block. That's if he started. Now, the difference, according to the stories, is that Buddha just didn't attach and cling to this. He accepted that, but also accepted that he is much, much more. So a lot of practices today, they want to cling to one or the other. We want to cling to, no thought, no mind, no emotion. I don't see that. Show me somebody without emotion and I'll flick them in the nose and piss them off. So I don't see that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I don't want to put anybody in a box, but this is a different practice then. This isn't that. So this is the human mind. And the human mind is shining attention at all times, unless you're in a dreamless sleep. But then I would still say that there are some attention things that could be potentially occurring. You're just not aware of them. And that's what we call below consciousness, not subconsciousness. I have rejected that phrase altogether. But below consciousness is everything that the brain is taking in through sensory perception, but that you're just not consciously aware of. And that is the definition of working memory. That's the reason you can drive from your house to work and you didn't even pay attention to the drive. You just arrived. You're like, I got mad like 15 times on the way, but wow, like I didn't even pay attention to the journey, to the trip. How did I get there without paying attention? Muscle memory, working memory, and long-term memory. Your working memory, you look at the car and you know what it is. You don't have to relearn what a steering wheel is. You don't have to relearn what pedals are. You just know because you've learned that already. And that's a part of your working memory. Gene does not approach a car and say, this is a car. In his mind, he's not thinking this. I will open the door by touching the handle and I will depress the switch and I will enter the key. No, he just does it. How does he do it? Working memory. And then physically, how does he do it? Muscle memory. How does he get to his destination? Long-term memory. He's been there before. He will remember how to get to work. So those are the three forms of memory that do not require deliberate conscious awareness. So our minds can do many things unconsciously, yes, and that is not subconscious. I have rejected the Freudian definition of subconscious, and so has modern psychology. Most modern psychology books now say under consciousness, below consciousness, or non-consciousness is the most recent one that I read. Subconsciousness, along with most of Freudian psychology, in any absolute sense, has been rejected. So moving on, this is the human brain, and we have attention. Attention is output. It is flowing out into the world via our sensory perception. What I'm going to put as light blue, or we'll use these little squares, is the world around us. A tree, the sky. Here's a bird over here. And here's Jerry. I can even pay attention to a human being. There's Jerry. And then here's my dog. He's out there. Here's some sound, maybe the sound of birds in the morning that I heard this morning. So that's all there, right? Are you with me so far, Jerry? What is the dark blue circle?
The cup.
The cup. And if you don't know what I mean by the cup, that's what I used to hold up a cup for my Facebook Lives. And then that is Ernest. It's my name, it's my likes, it's my dislikes, it's all of the synaptic connections, all of the cognition, everything that has ever happened in my brain, body, and spirit. I represented it with a coffee cup. So that's why we say the cup. Now, these dark blue, that is your problem. This is what you want to be when you grow up. This is some other concept. This is some other form of logic that we're going to think about, okay? And I don't know, maybe this is your life savings. Actually, I guess it doesn't matter because I haven't designated any of these. So there's just light and dark. So the light blue, the world around us. The dark blue, your own cognition, your thoughts, mostly thoughts. In the human experience today, it's mostly just thinking in words. Whatever language is your dominant language is the language that you're thinking in. And I have done it too, have spent the vast majority of our life experience unconsciously talking to ourselves. And if Gene, if you're saying something to yourself, you already know it. You've already had the realization, you've already had the aha. Talking it to yourself is actually not required. It can be fun, it can be interesting, it can be creative, it can be a great way to communicate with other people. But when we start to identify with that, now we'll get into what Buddha calls suffering, the attachment to the construct of self that creates all of our psychological suffering. And incidentally, it has helped create the conditions for all of our physical suffering. War. There's more than enough land. We don't need to fight for land. That's stupid. Food. We have more than enough food to feed every man, woman, child, dog, cat, hamster, everything. To not have enough food in this world today is, and I'm using this word deliberately, it is stupid. There's no reason for these things to be occurring other than we're kicking ourselves in the face. And what I mean by kicking ourselves in our face, our cognition throughout history, and I don't know when this happened, Jerry, I mean, but it has happened. We went from paying attention to the world around us. Maybe that's a tiger. Well, I don't want to get eaten by a tiger. So when I walk out of my hut, I'm going to pay attention to the world around me. Maybe it's the weather. You know, we're living in an ancient world that didn't have, you know, Google Maps, and it didn't have weather reports. So I needed to go outside and judge the weather because I have crops. I have to adapt to the weather. So I need to pay attention to it. So we evolved paying attention to the world around us. And then we started to pay attention to thought after language was created. That's okay, right? We're not going to declare war on language, are we, Jerry? I think that's just an opposite extreme. It's just another form of dysfunction. Thinking about not thinking is still just thinking. Thinking about spirituality is still just thinking. And if we're just thinking all the time, That is an imbalance. But does that mean that thinking is wrong? No. I'm thinking right now. I'm just doing it with my mouth open, and that's called talking. Easy. But unfortunately, Jerry, and this is what has created what I call the atrophy effect. The human being is born paying attention and actually communicating, just not in, words, because we haven't learned language yet when we're born. So we are born paying attention to the world around us. And if the mind is not in resistance, an interesting thing occurs. These arrows become two-way. It's not just a one-way arrow anymore. That's called feedback from the world around us. When I feel the light on my skin, I feel it, and I feel love and all kinds of things. I mean, I could get into it, but vibrancy, joy, excitement, that's feedback. So Jerry, what has occurred in the human experience is that we're not doing that. We do it sometimes when we go on vacation. We do it sometimes when we're, attempting to have fun on the weekend or whatever, and I call it a brush with spirit. But very rarely do we have, enough arrows going to the light blue. In the minds of many, most, and I don't want to get too far into judgment phrases, but that's why I just use the word common. It is very common for the human mind to be focusing on the dark blue. This is my problems. This is, do other people like me? This is this the right decision versus the wrong decision? Should I go left? Should I go right? Should I go up? Should I go down? Where do I find this? Where do I find that? How do I find enlightenment? How do I find peace? If you're thinking about it, you're just charging these dark blue rectangles. And that is the human experience presently, with maybe one or two arrows pointing towards the light blue. Does that analogy make sense? And that's what creates the atrophy effect. The atrophy effect is that it feels like work to pay attention to these light blue dots all the time because we're not used to doing it. If you don't use your arm for 10 years, any amount of movement is going to feel like work. It's not work. You are attention itself. We're just not used to doing it. Like in The Matrix, and I don't quote movies very often, why do your eyes hurt? Because you've never used them before. Why is it so difficult for us to pay attention to the present moment on purpose? We haven't been doing it. Nobody told us to do this. And that's why when we go on vacation, it's great for a day or two until we start thinking about going back to work, until we start thinking about, I'd like to move to Florida. I want every moment of my life to be vacation, doing nothing, just sitting on the beach, drinking pina coladas. And then before you know it, we look at other people who are doing that and we're like, oh, that's it. That's peace. That's joy. That's the ticket. Ask those people how they feel. And we've seen this before, so I don't have to illustrate that too much. So does that make sense, Jerry, this illustration?
Yes.
And so the T practice is this simple. All we're learning to do, I don't want to take these away. See, I'm not trying to take any arrows away. I'm just adding arrows to the world around me. Where's the light? That's a trick of attention. Where is my body? That's a trick of attention. Where is my nose? That is a trick of attention if you choose to pay attention to your nose. Doesn't matter what it is as long as you're not used to doing it. Does that make sense? As long as it's not already a habit. And that explains the T practice in its essence. All we're doing, we're not reprogramming. We're not going to the root of when I was 9 years old, Gene stepped on my foot. And since then, anytime somebody steps on my foot, I get enraged. Fine. Now you know, but what are you going to do with that? What did that have anything to do with changing it? It's already changing. Sanja, how do I pronounce your name? Sanja, Sonia?
Sanya.
Yes. Excellent. I had a feeling the J wasn't the way
Yeah.
I'm saying it. I find it easy to pay attention to the pale blue. I do it all the time. I also think a lot, but it's more tricky for me to stick my attention to the breath, my center, parts of my body, and I can understand. And again, that should not feel difficult. So some things could feel difficult. Climbing a mountain. If you've never done that before, that's going to be work. Like you got to do some push-ups if you expect to lift your body weight up a mountain. You know, you have to learn what bushes that you can touch, which bushes you can't touch, you know, so you don't get poisoning. Attention, you already know what to do. You already know how to do it. And sometimes it will feel tricky and it will feel difficult because we're not used to doing it. And the only thing to overcome that is to do it, is to practice, is just to keep on doing it. And that's kind of what we were going to get in today with the topic of checking in. So actually, that's a great segue. So let's just jump straight into that. All right, so this is the T practice. Now, the interesting thing about the human brain is you don't do both very well. Have you noticed that, Sonia? The more that you pay attention to the world around you, the less you end up thinking about it. The more you think about it, the more I can sneak up on you. The more I can, you know, startle you because you're not paying attention to the world around you. The brain is wired to do, you can do a little bit of both. Multitasking is possible. And that's where Gene will get into degrees of attention. You know, you can do a little bit of both. But the more you pay attention to the world around you, these little arrows towards the dark blue do start to reduce naturally. You don't have to declare war on them. You don't have to try to control them. That's different types of practices and different types of therapy that does that. And that's not what I'm recommending with this. If somebody wants to do cognitive behavioral therapy, fine. I'm not their judge. I don't care. I mean, I care about people, but you know, people are allowed to do whatever they want to do. So this is just one way of finding inner peace and everything that comes from that. All we're recommending to do with T is today I'll wake up and I'll pay attention to this blue one as well. Today, this afternoon, because and this is what we'll talk about next, is mapping out the practice, preparing your practice. And so today we're going to pay attention to this blue one. Well, because the mind doesn't do both very well, this one is gone and this one is gone. And then before you know it, I'm really engaging the world around me. And then the cognition, the thought, will start to become far more productive. It won't be repetitive. It won't be as habitual. It won't necessarily be around centered to control things. You may have a beautiful, creative, wonderful thought that you want to share with another person. That is the beauty of language. We created language as human beings for a reason. We don't have to reject it entirely. So after the first 4 topics of basic alignment, because that's just words, the first 4 topics is just talking. We go into the actual practice. This is the doing. This is the foundational practices. One is fox walking. And this is just walking mindfully, walking with attention on your feet, walking with attention on your breath. And the key feature, you will forget. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Forgetting is a part of this process. If you're not used to doing it, then of course you're going to forget. I mean, and that's why we can go easy on ourselves. We don't have to beat ourselves up because we forgot. As Donna would point out, the moment you have remembered that you have forgotten, you have remembered. You are in an act of remembering the moment you remember you've forgotten. And then we just go back to the practice. No judgment, no beating ourselves up, because that's just more thinking. And that type of cognition is some of the worst cognition we could ever think. And the only way we would get down on other people is if we've been getting down on ourselves. So number 2, fox walking. And okay, sorry. So these are when we start to get into the foundational practices, this is 4 modes. Now, what you may notice about these practices is it's things you're doing already. That's the ticket. That's what we do with mindfulness. I'm sitting right now. When I talk, I put awareness on my throat. One of these days, I won't do that, just for fun, and we'll see how my words change. The direction of the conversation, there'll be more, and I'll stutter a little bit more, and maybe the conversation will get a little bit unclear. But I have found that the more I place attention on the throat, the more my words come out smooth. The more the act of talking, it doesn't require as much energy. You know, the microphone is right here. Why would I yell? Doesn't make sense. If I put attention on my throat, I can remember to regulate that. My shoulders, Gene, are my shoulder being down an accident? Is it the result of 30 years of practice? No, it's the result of where I'm placing my elbows. So if you see my hands like this, I'm not trying to act smart. I'm not like, welcome. I am putting my hands together because my elbow will come slightly behind me. And when my elbows are slightly behind me, my shoulders come down naturally. I don't have to try to control my elbow, really. It wants to go there. That's where it belongs. So I just put attention on my elbows, and they just fit into their homes. And then my shoulders come down, my chest is square, my neck is relaxed, and all of a sudden, I have no pain in my shoulders, despite the fact that I'm sitting. So without trying to control, without trying to manipulate, I simply put attention into areas of my body, and I keep my attention there. But wait, how can I have my attention there while talking to you? Because I'm not putting all of my attention into my throat. If I did that, I couldn't say shit. Like, I can't. Yeah, like the more that I take my cognition into the throat, the less I'm able to formulate words, because that's a form of thought. Talking is thinking. You're just doing it out loud. Sometimes people don't modify the thought before they say it. And then you end up saying stuff that you wish you hadn't. So now we start to get into, so 4 modes practice, I am sitting. I make that into a mindfulness event. But I'm going to stand up from sitting. I will make that into a mindfulness event. I will pay attention to it. I will breathe into it. So when I'm done with this study session, I will stand up. I do not stand up accidentally. I place attention on my feet. I place attention on my body. I breathe as I lift my body up. And then I stand for just a moment and I sink the chi. I take a breath in and the energy goes down into my feet. And then I take a step. When I take a step, I put awareness on one foot in front of the other. My pace is deliberate. The feeling of my feet touching the ground, that's not a habit. I have to place my attention there or I won't. If I don't choose to place my attention there, it will go back to habit, which I call the 4 destroyers, but that's a different topic. But the habit is where my mind wants to go. It's created a groove of closed feedback loop. So one of the best examples is a little bit crude, but it describes the biological trap. And I've given this example, so I'll look at Gene while I say this though. But when I was working at the restaurant, and I divide my life into where I've worked, so I can talk about it that way. But when I worked at the restaurant with my Tai Chi teacher, I noticed that my attention was going to female body parts. Hey, I'm not Buddha. I'm not going to declare war on that. I'm a guy, and I like the female body part. But what I didn't like is my attention went there without my permission. It just went there. It was just always going there. And I wasn't having a say in the matter. That I'm not okay with. So I started to use a type of vision that is peripheral. It looks like I'm looking at the computer screen, but I am equally looking through the sides of my eyes. Peripheral vision. So when I would see an attractive, actually anybody, I wouldn't differentiate attractive or unattractive because that's a stream of thought. But I would look at a person and I would look at the whole person first. And that really changed the dynamic of how I interacted with other people. You can ask anybody, any person who knows me. If Jenny was here, she would agree. But actually, men don't talk that way to females very often. But there is no man in my life that will ever have an example of me saying, "Oh, Gene, come here. Hey, you see that? Check out that girl over there." No, I will never do that. Like, I will not take my attention and then try to trap someone else's attention and just unconsciously throw it all over the place. Never. Doesn't mean I don't ever look, but it's going to first be a deliberate act of attention. And then my attention will go where I want it to go after that. So that's just another example of choosing where my attention is. Defocused vision is the example. I have to do that. I can't, that's not an accident. My mind isn't habitually used to doing that. Therefore, it is a valid trick of attention. if I look at the frame of my glasses, my brain has filtered that out because it doesn't view it as necessary. It has nothing to do with my evolutionary survival. It has nothing to do with my creative output. So my eyes have filtered out my nose. Can you see your nose, Jean? Sonia, you can see your nose. It's always there. It's always in our field of vision, but our brains have filtered it out. I'm not recommending this because I don't know how it will affect your eyes long term. But if you chose to look at your nose, even for a moment, that's a deliberate act. See? I'm not used to doing that. My nose doesn't want to be seen. But by choosing to do that, I have deliberately pointed my attention to my nose. And if I choose to keep it there for any length of time, that is an act of free will. That is a choice. That is authenticity. There is no carved block that has told me that I should look at my nose. So this is something new, something that I'm introducing, something that is intentional, deliberate, and there is a lot of power in that act. And that's what we're learning to do, is tap into that power and then express it. So 4 modes practice, and then I offer deliberate driving, because that is when the unconscious mind is exposed. Sorry, not sorry, but I could learn so much about your mind by driving with you. Now, I don't have to judge you, though, which is a thought in my mind. So if I'm driving with Gene and he is clearly not deliberately driving, I'm probably going to need some of my own mantras just so that I don't entertain the thought of dying with Gene in the car. I may just have to tell him, Gene, slow down, homie. Like, this is a 35 and you're going 90. Like, I'm going to intervene. I got to say something. But the idea is that is the time that we most always, when we're driving, we are basically putting our unconsciousness on display. The act of driving can be muscle memory. We don't really call it short-term memory anymore. It's working memory. The memory that we need, that we don't have to relearn everything. And then you already know where you're going. That's how you get there. And so you're just accessing the unconscious mind. And we need that. I don't want to have to relearn a steering wheel. I don't want to have to relearn how to drive every time I get behind the wheel. So this is all very valid and beneficial. However, when people are driving, they are typically entertaining the dark blue in that picture. They're thinking about shit. They're judging other drivers. They're unconsciously just trying to get somewhere as fast as they can. Why? Why did we all do? I'm not even running late, but yet I'm trying to get there as fast as I can. What is occurring? Unconsciousness is occurring. Habit is occurring. And if you continue to let that occur, that will gain momentum. That is the accumulation principle. I can't make that up. Unconsciousness will accumulate more unconsciousness, and guess what? Unconsciousness will be very easy because we've practiced it. So
easy. So
yes,
easy. No, I just was laughing because it is so easy. I did that just yesterday. And I just said to John, as I noticed, I went out of deliberate driving and I went into a thought. The next thing I knew, the speedometer went up. I had driven, maybe half a mile. Didn't even remember driving it. Put my blinker on. It's just like, whoa. I completely out of deliberate driving.
Yes. And then the other thing that we added with deliberate driving is deliberate beverage. That's also another practice. And Sonia just took a drink, and I swear it had nothing. This has nothing to do with that. But the deliberate beverage is putting mindfulness every time we take a drink. And you could extend that to food as well, the deliberate meal, the deliberate beverage. So the beginning of the tea practice is taking everything that we're doing already, and we're just injecting some mindfulness. That's it. So I'm driving, I'm going to do it a little bit more deliberate. I'm taking a drink or I'm putting food up to my mouth, just going to do it a little bit more deliberate. That's all. I'm going to pay attention to the smell. I'm going to put the fork down in between bites. Why? Because my mind isn't used to doing it. Therefore, it's a trick of attention. Therefore, I'm doing this practice. Therefore, I will feel more peace as a result. So what we're adding new today, and so this is the next step in the tea practice as we're going along. So let's say Gene has come and he's feeling severe psychological suffering and he wants to change that. He's feeling depressed, he's feeling anxious, he's quick to anger, he's frustrated most of the time, he's constantly trying to figure things out. Every now and then he gets something shiny and he feels happy, fine. But ultimately he wants to change that. The good news is, Gene, we're not going to talk about any of that. I'm not going to pull you into the corner and say, tell me about your suffering. That we don't need to do that. So that's not this. And that's good news, in my opinion. So, but what we will do is I'll first talk about the four corners of T. Gene, let's talk about your attention. Otherwise, you won't know what to do with it. We can't do the T practice without talking about attention and what we do with it. So the nature of attention and tricks of attention is where I would begin with Gene, because he's in severe psychological suffering. And obviously that is a result of attachment, clinging, and that is a result of existing and perpetuating an imbalance. Existing, perpetuating, and sometimes even choosing to exist in an extreme. And that is why you're suffering. So we talk about the nature of attention, we talk about tricks of attention, but I need to let you know what we're doing with this and why it works. So we talk about the golden mean principle as taught by Socrates. Balance. Too much courage. You look foolish. You're just running into things and you're not a, you know, you look like a fool running into a fire. It's like, okay. Not enough courage. Looks like cowardice. You're paralyzed and indecision. We're looking for the golden mean, the right amount of courage at the right time. And if you are not meeting the present moment with resistance, that will occur automatically because you are the you are. Gene is the it is. He is God in every form or fashion or way that we can use the word. Gene is that. He is infinite intelligence. So if he gets out of his own way, he won't need to think about extremes or balance. He can feel it. Does that make sense? And then from the golden mean principle, I'll just explain to Gene what is different about T. The difference is this is not an act of control. Specifically, maybe because I'm a guy and men have the attachment to control. And if it was Freud, if it was Adler, Freud would say, well, Gene is addicted to control because of his biology. And Adler would say, no, Gene is I don't want to speak for women, but yeah, it's both. But what's interesting is that Freud and Adler were trying to find this in men. Why are men so aggressive? Where does this aggression in men come from? It probably did come from a little bit of biology. We had to evolve on this planet to a certain extent, even if we're not talking about evolution through common descent. We're just talking about, adapting and changing over time, which is the definition of evolution, change over time. So we're changing over time. That would be biology, testosterone. Gene, that could have benefited us once upon a time when we were still hunting lions and tigers and bears and we had to worry about the weather and stuff, or, we were more concerned about the weather. Hey, that probably came in very handy, the testosterone. We're at the top of the food chain. We can dial it down a little bit. It's like we don't have to kill each other. And that's where the testosterone has gone. It's gone into acts of self-inflicted violence, and that's stupid. And so the other one is environment. And that was Adler. Adler was all about environments. The environment is what is creating the carved block. Turns out they're both right. And what's so ironic to me is both of them were trying to find male aggression, and then they fought each other their entire careers, which is an act of male aggression. And it's just, did anybody else see the irony in the psychologists of antiquity? So what I did is I was like, okay, wait a second, maybe they're both a little bit right. Maybe it has to do with a little bit of biology and a little bit of our society. And maybe they're feeding each other. And it creates this closed feedback loop that we call our society currently. So what I'm recommending is just one thing: paying attention more to the world around us as it's happening, without labeling, without judging. And this is the key. This is the trick. This is what it's all about for me. Without attempting to control. I am not controlling my own attention. I can't. There's no subject and object. There's no subject to control the object of attention. I am it. I can't control attention. I am attention. I can control thought, and I'm going to put that in air quotes because I don't. I don't try to control thought. But thought, I've had moments without thinking. I'm going to do it right now. I'm not slumping over like a broken robot. It's not like I'm malfunctioning because I'm not thinking, but I'm still paying attention. So simple geometrical proof. If I can think and have attention, or have attention and not think, they're not the same thing. One doesn't rely on the other, but I've never had a moment without attention. So I must be closer to attention than I am to thinking, because I've had moments without thought. I've had moments without anger. I've had moments without extreme emotions, but I've never had a moment without attention. Never. Not since I was born. I was born with attention, and I will transition to something new with attention. Where does the attention go after that? I'm not completely sure. And I don't need to know, frankly. It has nothing to do with where my mind is now. So the next step of T, okay, so we went to 4 modes, and then we went to deliberate driving, and then with deliberate driving, I just throw in deliberate beverage, because I don't think that needs a whole week. All right, so are there any questions about these 3? And then I'll jump in, and I would call these foundational practices. Fox walking is walking mindfully. 4 modes practice is sitting, standing. So, Sonia, I'm just going to pick on you because your video is on. So that's just a reminder. If your video is on, I can see you. So I pick on Jean. Sometimes I pick on Donna. They have their video on. So, Sonia, you woke up this morning. Do you sleep in a bed? Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point today, you were laying down.
Yes.
I take the opportunity to create a mindfulness practice out of that. And then when you were laying down, you sat up in your bed. And then you stood up from your bed. And then you started walking to get away from your bed. Well,
Yes.
not to get away from it, but yeah, traveling away from the bed and into the day and into the world. The only thing that I have recommended is to start to take tricks of attention and add it to that. That's it. That's pretty simple, right?
Yeah, but I think my brain starts like the moment I wake up.
And now that's what we're going to get
Totally,
into today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Excellent segue. So we do all of those things, and now we're learning to do those deliberately. Excellent. And I call this foundational practices. And now we start to really set the stage for the rest of the T practice. And so number 4, we'll start with checking in. And I will start to call this category essentially developing the practice. A stab. And so the first topic that I would talk about in establishing your daily practice is checking in. So there is a very subtle difference between checking in and cognitive redirection. So the subtle difference is cognitive redirection is because we're experiencing stimuli that is unbeneficial for us. So checking in is you're just doing it as often as you can remember. That's the difference. So I'm sure to folks here, you know, Jerry and Shayna, I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Redirection is because we have some sort of stimuli. So maybe Jean is complaining about a movie and I'm the movie theater worker. Hey, I'm not the director, man. You watched the whole movie. Was the popcorn good? Was the temperature good? Was the picture good? what do you want from me? Like, I'm not going to give you a refund because you didn't like it. But now he's getting irritated. He's getting angry. He's getting upset at me. And I'm starting to think, God, what an old fart. Like, why is he, what happened to this guy to make him so bitter? And like, and then I'm starting to get mad. And it's like, it's almost time to get off. And this guy won't shut up. Like, okay, so that's an example of what is occurring commonly. But what I'm doing is thinking all that stuff while smiling to the customer. But the whole time I'm thinking, God, I wish this guy would fuck off. Like, I really don't like old people. He smells like potatoes, which he doesn't. I'm sure Gene smells fine. But the idea is, in one example, the thought and the cognition is not beneficial. So I'm going to go back to the practice. I'm going to go back to paying attention to the world around me, because I'm not doing that right now. I'm judging Gene. I'm thinking thoughts that don't serve me. They're repetitive. They're habitual. They're not making me feel well. And so I'm going to redirect that back to this practice, which is just paying attention with multiple points. That's something a little bit different that we'll talk about down the road, okay? But what we're talking about now is something that I just call checking in. And it involves the first pillar of T, presence. And so I'm simultaneously going to deliver the 3 pillars. So this is when we start to talk about the 3 pillars of this practice. It's really just the third one, because you can't have the third one without the first 2. But for the sake of conversation and explanation, I have divided this so that we can understand it better. So the first one is presence, to be present. That's checking in. And I did this when I was working at the movie theater. The movie theater is when I was accumulating a lot of information and I just had this aha, I got to start doing some of it. Like, if I just keep on reading all of the spiritual yada, 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 it's not making me feel any better. It's not like just thinking about enlightenment makes me feel enlightened. And I was starting to notice that. And so at the movie theaters, when I really started to try some of the things that I was learning, some of it didn't work out so well, and some of it worked fabulously. I haven't removed the things that didn't work out. I have just found a new order of operations. So, and we talk about that later too. But so when I was at the movie theater, that's when I started to do some of the things that I was learning, and checking in was one of them. All throughout the day, as often as I could remember, I would say, here I am, in this moment, with this life, with this body, and I would start to name things around me. I am present. I have to be present to name shit around me. That is one part of this practice, is to be present. Does that make sense? And that is checking in. One of the things we talked about last week is establishing this full scope of a practice. So Gene, when do you think I start my T practice during the day? So today is a day. When do you think I started my practice?
Upon awakening, or maybe just a little before that.
But just to take it down to a more tangible, thing, the moment I open my eyes, I check into the present moment. And the way that I personally do that, now the good thing about T is that it will be basically your expression. So Gene plays tennis. He will create T practice around tennis. I don't. Karen, you do things that you do that I don't. Shana does things that I don't, and so on and so forth. The more you apply T principles, the more you're making it your own practice. And that's what T is about. I am not recommending behavior necessarily. That's something different. But I am not telling you what to do. However, I do something that I call, and I don't remember where I learned this. I stole it from somebody. I don't know who. If they rewatch this video, thank you. But for many years now, I do something that I call the deepest love, highest vision, and the longest reach. So the deepest love is this life. And so the moment I wake up, I give some words. I use words, and I say something to myself of appreciation. And it gets my process of the T practice going. I have checked into the moment. I am alive. I've just woken up. I love this life experience. I love this opportunity to exist. And so the moment I wake up, I connect to something, my own existence, my own attention and aliveness, this opportunity to exist. Why do I do that? Because when I worked at the movie theater, I would wake up with paralyzing anxiety. The moment I would wake up, the words would start. I would just immediately interject into what Gene was thinking about me. Gene ain't in the room. I'm not going to see Gene. Why am I thinking about what Gene cares about? Like, what the fuck? So I wake up and I would instantly launch into cognition that does not serve me. Repetitive, the same fucking thoughts again and again and again and again. It wasn't even in a different order. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Same words, same order, again and again and again and again. Nobody will ever be able to convince me that that is functional, that that is a functional way to interact with our own mind. It's not. So I noticed that. And I can't just expect it to go away. I couldn't just expect it to, you know, I would take a pill and then just wake up. And, you know, maybe if I did, that's fine, but that's temporary. That I'm relying on something. So I don't want a pill. You can keep your pills. You can keep your reprogramming and your, you know, these are things that I'm not interested in. I don't want to be hypnotized. That's you hypnotizing me. No, I want empowerment. This is my mind. This is my body. I will do this myself. And together. That's why we call this group study, because we come together and we encourage one another, and then we all practice. I'm practicing. So that's why I'm not putting myself on a pedestal. If I don't do my practice, well, then I shouldn't be doing this. You know, I shouldn't be leading the group if I'm not doing my practice myself. But I am. So the moment I wake up, I immediately go into checking into the present moment, my deepest love. My longest reach is always going to be outside of always. I put that in air quotes. But it's something, and this is how I read it or I heard it. I don't even remember now. It was so long ago. But basically they said to think about something or entertain something, because it's not just a thought, it's a vision. I'm envisioning it with my imagination. So I'm immediately engaging one of the evolutionary traits of the human being, and that's imagination. I have no reason to believe that my dog is imagining anything. A beach, maybe food. That's it. He's led by his biology. I'm not. I am actualized. I have evolved to the point where I'm not just a slave to biology or social conditioning or the habits I've created already. I can actually deliberately intend the direction of my own cognition. That's important. So I'm going to do a lot of that. Because if I don't, I end up just like my dog. I'm just led by my biology or society, and then before you know it, I'm in a whole world of unsatisfactory shit. So I have my longest reach, which is an enlightened society, and enlightened, they're feeling lightness of the mind. They're not clinging, attaching, attempting to control and all that. And then I have my highest vision, and the highest vision is always changing, but that's something that I desire. So my desire, whether it's $1 billion in the bank or $1, I just want a little stand. And it could be in front of my business. It could be in front of my tower. None of that shit matters. It's a stand. And it has my books. And it has maybe some art that Ida made. And it has some art that I picked up from somewhere else. That's it. That's fine for me. That's all I want. And this right here, everything is working towards that highest vision. And I'm not trying to control, I'm not trying to manipulate the world around me, but I will remind myself of that vision. And then I proceed forward with the rest of my practice. I don't get up without paying attention to it. I don't stand out of bed without paying attention to it. And I've gotten to the point, and this is in this practice, and it's a little bit later on, but I always have a deliberate point of attention. It's not magic. It doesn't make me better. I have just practiced a lot. And because of my practice, I can maintain a point of attention that is on purpose while doing everything else, while working, while doing everything, eating, sleeping, everything. And it improves the quality of most of the things that I do. Does that make sense? So if we're going to set up our practice, so first I immediately engage my practice. But what do you think, Ida? Do I have a plan for the rest of the day, or am I just going to wing it?
I would say you have a plan with your tricks of attention, your mantra, your bubble, all kinds of things, and then you just meet things as they come. And if there's any difficulties or any sticky moments, you are always employing your tricks of attention to keep you where you want to be.
Yep. So you guys can do this too. I have a note card, and I'll post this note card back in the group chat. And Sonia, if you would like, I'll add you to our warrior training group, or our T the Complete Practice group. It's just for communication, really. So like if I can't make a class, or if I can't do something and then, you know, someone has a question. So it's really just for communication. But so I've woken up, I've checked in, I've engaged my points of attention, I'm embodying my tricks of attention as I go throughout the day, and I got them all written down. I'm not making shit up as I go along. I'm paying attention to what I call a toolbox, a very diverse toolbox that I can alternate between all of these different points of attention as I go throughout my day. Light sources. I know where the light source is coming from. I'm paying attention to the light and how it interacts with the shadow. You see the shadow behind me. My mind isn't used to paying attention to that. I have to choose to pay attention to shadows. That's a trick of attention. I could write that down on my note card. Today, I will pay attention to shadows while paying attention to my wrist. Why wrist? Maybe today I'm going to wear an object of power, which is a part of my hydrostasy practice. So I like crystals, and I can get into the woo-woo, but I don't live there. So this is just something to remind me to check in. I feel my wrist today because I got this thing on it. It has weight. I can feel it on my skin, right? So this can become a valid point of deliberate attention. I was once snapping myself with a rubber band, and then somebody walked up and said, "Ernest, what are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what am I doing?" They're like, "You're snapping yourself with a rubber band." And I'm like, "Oh shit, I am." It was no longer an act of power. It was no longer a trick of attention. What began as a trick of attention quickly became a habit. And I was doing it without even knowing it. That's not a trick of attention anymore. There are some things that will never become habit, such as defocused vision, because we have the ability to do both. Breath. We can be consciously aware of the breath, and it can become automatic. That will never become a habit. You can never habitually pay attention to your breath. That is impossible. And that's great. It's because of the human hardwire or hardware and hardwiring, we can work with that. We know how it works. We know how the mind and the body works. We can work with the dynamics rather than trying to push against them. So I wake up, I immediately check in. And then, now my practice, I have a trick of attention all throughout the day, and I have them written down in case anybody is wondering what Ernest is doing with his mind throughout the day. I'm using defocused vision. I'm paying attention. And again, this isn't fancy. I just can pay attention to my whole body in space and time because I practiced. I went from paying attention to one little area to 2 areas to 3 areas. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I can feel my skin. And then I could start to pay attention to what psychologists today call proprioception, or the feeling of your body in space and time. If you have ear damage, it will damage the sense of your body in space and time. If you have other damages to your body, it can damage the sense of your body in space and time. So proprioception is when all of our senses are working together and we get a feeling of physicality in space, and it's involving the peripheral nervous system as well. So throughout the day, I just defocus the vision. So the vision can be focused, like I'm going to focus on this word, this letter K. Like I am really focusing on this right now. Like all of my attention is really focusing in on the letter K. Or I can do more of a peripheral type of sight where I can see 2 different points. So when I'm driving, I use defocused vision while driving. I am not recommending this for you though, because heaven forbid somebody gets in an accident and they're trying to blame Ernest. But I have found it makes me a better driver. I can sense when cars are next to me. I can sense when cars are behind me because my vision is defocused. So really it's just practice, you know, because I've been practicing, I can do it throughout the day. But before I was able to do it throughout the day, I had to check in and defocus my vision. It was an act. Does that make sense? And you can use glasses too. Like you can focus on the rim of your glasses and that will help vision become peripheral. You can choose 2 points on either side of you. So for example, you're looking at a computer screen, right? And so, and it's okay to use this word, but habitually we're used to focusing in on the person who's talking. We've been taught that we should always just be focusing on the person's eyes, or we should be looking directly at the, now look at the whole screen. That's peripheral vision. You're using more of the scope of your vision to look at the outside rim. So when I watch TV, for example, again, I'm not Buddha. I'm not gonna, I like TV. I like stories. So every now and then I'll watch a TV show. So when we look at enlightenment, or when we look at inner peace, we see this guy with bald hair in a forest with a river behind him, and he's sitting in a particular posture, and his clothes are the monk's clothes, and he's got these long beads, and we're like, oh, that's what I need to do. That's what he did, you know. That's not necessarily what we have to do. We can take the same principles and apply that to everything else. So when I watch TV, I make sure that I'm maintaining deliberate attention. One way I do that is to look at the whole screen. Or sometimes I'll look behind them where the director isn't highlighting. So for example, during interviews, I look at the bookshelf. I'm always looking at people's bookshelves behind them. I want to know what books they're reading. And also, it's just deliberate. My mind isn't used to doing that. So with defocused vision, it really does. You check in, and then you defocus it, and then you'll forget. And that's what this practice is in the beginning. It's forgetting and then remembering, forgetting and then remembering. And then, you know, Gene, he's been practicing for like close to a year now. He's starting to remember more than he forgets. And then we go down to Ida, who's been practicing for 3 years or so. She's actually starting to remember most of the time. And now it's easy and it feels preferred to engage the world around us. And she has started to dissolve the atrophy effect. Or we have Shayna, who's been practicing for 5 years or 6 years, and she always feels her body in space and time. Her body has become a background where she is always aware of her own physicality. And that is the kind of the evolution of this practice. First, we forget all the time because we're not doing it. We're not practicing. So before we start practicing, we're just in a constant habitual feedback loop, a closed feedback loop. My eyes went to booths because I was habitually trained to do that, or my eyes would go to chocolate, or it would go to a commercial, or it would go to this, or it would, but I had no say in it. I wasn't doing that on purpose. I was a leaf at the mercy of the wind. I was like a cloud. That's an excerpt from my next book is I'm like a cloud at the mercy of the wind. I never know where I'll end up or what shape I'll be there when I get there. I thought that was pretty clever. So the defocused vision is remembering to do it. That's this whole practice though, is remembering to do it. But defocused vision could be one of the things in your toolbox. It doesn't have to be your all your tools. You can choose a color. Maybe today you're going to pay attention to blue. Every time you see blue, you'll place your attention there. So there is blue in that picture, right? And I'm going to look this direction and I'm still paying attention to the blue. Like I can't see it, but I'm still pointing a little bit of my attention towards the blue. Does that make sense? I'm still kind of like, is it there? I don't know. Gene could have removed the painting and I wouldn't know the difference because I can't, well, now I can because I'm looking in the screen, but I'm still lending my attention. I'm pointing it a direction. I learned that from Tai Chi when my teacher told me to listen behind me. And I'm like, what? Oh, I can listen directionally. Does that make sense? So wake up, check in, immediately engage your practice. And that sets the pace for the rest of the day. It really will. And then I have a toolbox Maybe I sit down and I add to that toolbox every day. Maybe I circle a couple things because today I want to do these things. You know, today I'm going hiking. So I'm really going to pay attention to the sky and the ground at the same time. Why not? It's always there. Anytime you're outside, you can see the sky, unless you're in like a city. And even sometimes then, just look straight up and you can see the sky. So the sky is always there, but my mind doesn't view it as necessary to pay attention. There's no velociraptors. There's no predators in the sky that my mind is concerned about, because the brain wants to preserve my safety. It wants to keep me safe. That's the brain. That's what it does. I'm okay with that. Thank you, brain. So, but right now, there's no predators in the sky. So every time you go outside and you pay attention to the sky and the ground, both, that is an act of deliberate free will. You've chosen to do that. It's not a part of habit. There's no evolutionary purpose necessarily to do that, although now we're giving it an evolutionary purpose, but it shouldn't have been that way. And then, so a note card, a piece of paper, I used to write on the walls to remind me to do my practice because it was that important to me. So checking in is going to be one of those things that we start to do right away. And that would be one of the very first things that I recommend in this practice. You know, so maybe we're doing some fox walking, maybe we're doing some deliberate driving, maybe every day we're taking some time with a beverage to sip, to pay attention. What does it feel like? What does it taste like? How heavy is it? Maybe it's just 10 seconds that we do this. That will add up. It will make a difference. It will start to get the practice going. Does that make sense? And so checking in, and then I'll go to Jerry's question. Checking in can involve words. So when I check in, I don't just do it abstractly, especially when I was at the restaurant. I would use words to check in. I would say it to myself. Here I am in this body, in this life, with this mind, with this breath, I am present. And then I go about my business, and then I would forget. And then I would get off into some stupid shit, and then I'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait a second. Where is my mind now? Here I am, in this moment, in this life, with this bracelet, I can be present. Does that make sense? So now we're starting to use words in a way that will benefit us because it's pointing back to our practice. That's not trying to control. That's not attempting to manipulate. It's just reminding yourself of what we should have been doing from the day we were born. Engaging and paying attention and learning and absorbing and being creative and all of that. We're born doing that. We just start to attach to a carved block, and that interrupts the flow. So checking in, checking in, checking in. You can do it 1,000 times a day. You can do it 100 times a day. You can do it 20 times a day. The more, the merrier. I really recommend it. So Jerry, yes. Question, comment, concern?
I just wanted to add, when Sonia asked that question about defocused vision, that was one that I had asked Ernest as well, more than once. And then right then when he said it, I was just going to say what really helped me was when he described noticing the rims of our eyeglasses. And I'm wearing mine when I'm in class. And I noticed that Sonia had hers on too. And that just really helped me when he described that. And I'm doing it right now. I'm looking at the screen at you guys, but I'm also noticing and observing the rims of my glasses. Does that, as you do that, Sonia? Yeah, you're looking, but you're also noticing the rims of your glasses. And it's quite enjoyable. But it really helped me understand what he meant by it. That was just very helpful for me too.
And then why are you doing it, Jerry? Are you doing it because it's enjoyable?
Well, I want to feel good. I want peace. But I'm doing it because while I'm doing that, I'm not thinking. While I'm doing that, I'm not trying to figure shit out. I'm not thinking dumb shit. I'm
right.
thinking something.
And we're starting to develop some things. So as this practice progresses, I start to introduce acronyms. So I put things in categories of threes and fours. It seems like we have the four destroyers, we have the four factors of embodiment, we have the rule of three. Believe me, this will help you remember as you go along. At first, it's confusing as shit. It's like, oh, let's four of this, three of this, two of this, one of this. So I really like organizing things in that way. So the defocused vision and all of the other tricks of attention. In the beginning, what we're looking to do is we're looking to check in, and what we're starting to develop is what I call cognitive attention training. We're learning to become aware consciously and on purpose of our own cognition. So who can I ask? Mike, are you there? Or are you just listening? It's okay if you're just listening. You don't have to respond. Okay. Mike's doing the dishes, so we'll leave Mike alone. But so anybody else, if you've ever been angry and maybe towards the end of the day, you start to reflect on that and you're like, oh my God, like I was so angry and like I was ready to choke that person. And I can't believe that was me, and we're kind of looking back and we're reflecting on events that happened. That's because while they were happening, we were completely unconscious. The mind was not deliberate at all. It was just going in this biologically, habitually, society-driven, closed feedback loop of conditioning. So the difference is with this practice is we start checking in, that is starting to develop our cognitive attention. I know as it's happening, when I'm going away from peace, I can feel it. I can feel right now, if I start to go away from peace and joy and vibrancy, it's occurring. Like I can feel that as it's happening. And that's what we're looking to develop is attention on the mind, the body, the emotion as it's occurring. So that everything isn't about digging up our past so we can find out where it all began. And it's not about trying to predict and control an imaginary future. It's just about where is my mind now and did I put it there? That's it. That's this whole practice really. It really is that simple. Where is my mind, the direction of my mind right now? And did I place it there or has it just kind of ended up there? Maybe it just kind of ended up there and I don't feel terrible. You're still a leaf at the mercy of the wind. You never know when something's going to occur and then just all of a sudden you feel terrible. And then you're just realizing it 2 days later. You're like, oh my God, like the last 2 days have been a shit show. So yes.
I said when you were bringing up like digging into your past, I've actually found that I've not had to do it. It just it like presented itself to me. It's like I didn't have to search for why am I doing this? By doing the practice, it presented itself to me. Oh, I see. I can see where that came from. I don't have to go into, why does this happen? It just presents itself to me.
Right. And that's actually fast forwarding a little bit to some of the more, I don't want to use the word advanced, but it's a little bit more complicated of a concept. But the idea is that when you are not in an act of resistance, meaning that the mind is connected, it's not resisting the present moment. I'm paying attention to it. This is my life. There has always just been the present moment. There's no such thing as past and future. I'm making that shit up. There has always just been this moment, whether I'm paying attention to it or not, whether I'm engaging it or not, whether I'm honoring it or not. It has always been right now. If I'm thinking about the future, I'm doing it right now. If I'm thinking about the past, I'm doing it right now. If I'm kicking myself in the face psychologically, I'm doing it right now. But what Shana is kind of alluding to is that when that stops, when we start seeing the world around us, that's why I call it seers training, because we're starting to feel the world around us. We're getting the feedback from the world around us. The answers come to us. We have realizations. We have more ahas. That's what I call functional thought, because typically they're going to occur as thoughts. We've created the minds that we have right now. And if we've been doing a lot of thinking up to this point, very likely your ahas are going to occur as thoughts, and that's okay. Maybe write it down, tell a friend. I don't recommend going into more cognition repetitively and habitually and trying to understand the aha. That's a trap. That's a rabbit hole that isn't necessary. So let's say I have an aha. And then I have an aha about the aha. And then I have an aha about the aha about the aha. That's all just going to occur because I'm not resisting the present moment. That's called flow, unobstructed flow. And if I were to define flow even more, me as Ernest and the present moment are aligned. We're moving together. As it moves, I move. As I move, it moves. That's called alignment. Have we ever heard the word alignment? Like in different groups and law of attraction and things like that. It's like alignment. Okay. Alignment to what? To source. Oh, okay. So alignment to what? So when I say alignment to what, I mean alignment to the moment as it's happening. You are aligned to everything around you. You are moving with it rather than against it. We're flowing with it like water rather than against it. So you start to see all this ancient philosophy suddenly make sense. And it's like, oh. And that is a virtue of the practice. Yes, you cannot force it. You cannot try to control it. In fact, trying to force it and trying to control it, you will end up with an erroneous answer. Error. Syntax error. That's what we used to call it, if you remember, Jerry. Syntax error.
Without resistance, things are right where we put them.
Well, without resistance, you're deliberate. And if you're deliberate, I put that there. Like, I did that. And so we give the example of the spider's web. I am a spider that for 30 years created an unconscious web. And it was a hot mess. Like over here in my web is anxiety, over here is depression, over here is trying to control, over here is telling things that aren't true. There was a point where I would lie because I was so attached to the construct of Ernest that I would say things that weren't true to make Gene like me more. You know, I'd be like, oh, Gene, but I can run a 4.40. I can do this and I can do that. Have you ever seen men doing that with women? It happened the other day. There was, well, I don't want to get too specific because these are recorded, but yeah, it happens. There's this constant subtle attempt to manipulate and control. If I want you to think a certain way about me, I am trying to control you. That is a form of control and manipulation, and I can always feel it, especially when I'm present. That's another virtue of the practice. I don't have to judge it. I don't have to call you out, but I can feel when somebody is attempting to manipulate me. But it's just the way people are, so it's fine. The last time I was lied to, I didn't call them out. I didn't tell them about themselves. For what? Like, they're still probably going to lie again. So they're not going to learn from this just because Ernest called them out. So it just didn't matter. I let it go. And by let it go, I didn't give it unnecessary cognition. So even let it go, we have a definition. That's just not fancy wordplay. Let it go means I have quieted the mind. I would tell my teacher, you know, oh, something, but I've let it go. I don't care. You know, somebody cut me off in traffic, but it's fine. I don't even care about it. 15 minutes later, you know, that motherfucker that pulled, you know what, Gene? I don't care. It's fine. No, I've let it go. No, you haven't. You keep thinking about it. You have let nothing go. That's called a self-hustle. So I think this is 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is video number 8 in 13 of basic alignment. And this is all about checking in. And I would recommend getting creative. At the movie theater, I had other people remind me. They didn't know what they were doing. I did. And so I would say, Gene, every now and then just tap me on the shoulder. Why? Just do it. You're doing it for me, man. And we're friends, so do it. And so people would do that. They would tap me on the shoulder. They would try to push me. I would listen to the song, Let It Go, the Frozen song from the movie Frozen. I was working in the movie theater. So I had it timed where I could go, and there were 18 theaters, and it was playing in like 12 at one point, like when the movie first came out. So I would just walk to each theater and listen to Let It Go. And it was a deliberate act. I had to do it on time. And I would walk there in a certain way. And when I would get there, I would listen to it in a certain way. I would stand in a certain way. And it's all just a result of my attention being a certain way. And that was a deliberate practice. I turned Frozen's Let It Go into a mindfulness deliberate practice. I was using the tools around me. It's what I had. But it would be an opportunity to check in. Oh, and then sometimes I would forget it, and I would hear it, and I would like, ah, shit, I missed the 12:15 show. But it reminded me to check in. And then Shana had to paint over the walls, because sometimes on the walls it would say, where is your mind now? Or there is no spoon, or different things to remind myself to check in. My tattoos, they face me, because this tattoo isn't for you. I didn't put this on my body so that you would think something about me. I put this on my body to remind me of me. That's why it faces me. That's why the word Tao faces me, not you, because this is a reminder. So I went so far as to put permanent ink on my body to remind myself to be present. But that's just the first pillar. And so we'll talk about this more next week or later or throughout the week. If we, tomorrow I'm going to do a workshop, and it's just focused information about a particular topic. And then Sunday we've been doing the podcast at 6:15. There is a very good chance, not 100% sure, but I might just launch myself back into this all full time. We could be getting to a period where I do feel more comfortable doing this. I don't want to be people's teacher. I don't want to be their life coach. I don't want to be a guru, a master. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to share what's worked for me in an artistic way, in a way that feels genuine. And that's it. Because we're all here to create. And how do I know that? Because you've been doing it, whether you like it or not. If Gene is trying to piss off Ida, he's creating something. If he's sleeping, he is creating something, snoring, perhaps. So we're always creating something. We've come into this world creating. We will transition from this physicality creating, and very likely whatever happens after this will still involve creation, because the birds are creating, the stars are creating, the sun is creating, everything is moving and changing and creating. That's a universal principle. I ain't got nothing to do with it. I didn't make it up, and I have no choice. That is the way it is. That's the way the universe moves. It's changing. It's always changing. That's transience. And it's always in a form of creation and counterbalance. And that's fine. I can go with that rather than against it. When I go with it, I am aligned. I am in alignment with everything else around me. So the idea is to become present. Here I am. But then there's still this whole other thing that we call mindfulness. And they are not the same. Because I can be present and I could judge Gene's flannel shirt. I could start thinking thoughts about his posture. I could start thinking thoughts about this, that, or the other thing in the present moment, and that is not mindfulness. So to be present is required to be mindful. You can't be mindful without being present, so that's why it's the first pillar. So we start by just becoming present. We got to practice that. We have to practice presence. Here I am. Where is my mind? Back to the practice. As often as you can remember. Here I am, back to the practice. Here I am, back to the practice. Wake up, here I am. This is my practice. Now, we will have things as we go down the road called battlegrounds. We can change the terminology. I don't care. I'm just using words to describe something. We do have areas in our lives where we have created more resistance than others. So maybe Jean has no resistance to waking up. But Ida, the moment she wakes up, her mind goes into psychological suffering, trying to control, cognitive resistance. They're different people, so they have a different battleground. Gene wakes up and he feels vibrant and he feels alive and he forgets to practice. That's his battleground. Ida wakes up feeling terrible, feeling upset, feeling angry, and she forgets to practice. That's her battleground. Little did Gene know he has a battleground too. He wakes up and he feels so good that he forgets to do his practice. He is a leaf at the mercy of the wind. If space junk falls on his house, who knows where he's going to end up cognitively. And that brings us to the third pillar. If we want to maintain mindfulness, if we want to maintain presence, we have to be active with our attention, not just observing. Eckhart Tolle talks for days about just observing the present moment. And I get it. I like it too. But I engage the present moment. My mind is where I put it on purpose. So I'm not just abstractly hoping to stay mindful. Has that worked for anybody so far? Have you just hoped and to stay mindful and you did? No. That's what I mean. That shit didn't work for me. Sitting down and trying to meditate just didn't work for me. Now I want to. Now I could do it for an hour and it's no problem. I can just sit. I feel good. I feel entertained. I feel charged. I feel full of energy. So I just reverse engineered it. I've just done it a different way. Rather than trying to force myself into meditation, I embodied mindfulness and now I desire it. Who knew? I bet somebody knew. They just didn't tell us. So presence. Next week, we'll talk more about the mindfulness factor. And then we'll really talk about how to sustain it and embody it. And that is the third pillar, tricks of attention. Is my attention where I put it on purpose? Whether it's the color green, whether it's the sky and the ground, whether it's defocused vision, whether it's my chest, whether it's my elbow, whether it's the feeling of aliveness and chi and prana and vibrancy, and doesn't matter what it is. As long as your mind isn't used to being there, it is a powerful act of deliberate attention. And then so as we go along in this practice, we'll talk about establishing internal points of attention and external points of attention at the same time. And then when we get into counterbalance, that is when somebody has decided that they want to embody. They really want to be mindful and present all the time. Then we start with what I call the rule of three and the three-strike rule. Then we start with what I call leaking power. And then that's when we really start to embody this practice. Does that make any sense? So anything that can remind you, if you can have your kids remind you. And I like what Donna talked about with segmenting. She deliberately divides her day into pieces. And she'll approach each piece just a little bit differently, but the same principles. It involves attention, it involves mindfulness, and it involves placing it deliberately. But she's in different circumstances and different things are going on, so she can do different tricks of attention relative to what is occurring. And I think that's brilliant. That makes a lot of sense. So segmenting, I have added as a part of the 13 points in this first part of basic alignment. Alignment to what? The present moment. So it's not just, I'm not just using words. Every single word that I use has a definition, and every definition is just a description of my experience. It's not any absolute definition. If you use the word spirit differently, fine. As long as you know what I mean, you know, when we're talking about things, and if you want to share what you mean about spirit, fine, but I got to know what you mean. You know, if you're saying a word and you don't know the definition of it, we're not really talking. We're just bumping gums and pushing air around at that point. We're not communicating anything. Does that make sense? A lot of light sources and shadow sources in Jean's room right now. What was that, Jerry? Sorry.
Bumping gums. I've never heard that. That's awesome. That's hilarious.
I got that from a movie. I don't know where or when, but I cannot take credit for that. I take credit for the act of allowing, but I can't take credit for presence. I didn't invent presence. I can't take credit for mindfulness. Like what? That predates Ernest. And I can't even take attention or take credit for the third pillar. I don't even want credit. Like that's just another thought stream. But at least in terms of originality, the act of allowing, I just don't see that in the world today. Everything has a little bit of attempting to control. Your gums are bumping. You're talking. Bumping gums. Just talking. Just pushing air around. Not communicating is the thing. Communication is different. Communication is what we're doing with the world around us when we're engaging it. Our entire life experience is actually just a process of communication and memory. Communicating with the world around us, remembering how it feels, coming back to that feeling. That's what it's all about. So just real quick, and then I'll open it up to any questions, comments, or concerns before we get out of here. But so I would say the practice kind of looks like this as well. So I have another way to describe it. We create a base that we call the four corners. I guess it can look like this. Because this base has 4 corners. The 4 corners are attention, there are other principles in T, but the principle of balance, which is the golden mean, I stole that from Socrates. I'm sure he won't mind. And then we have the act of allowing. The act of allowing is what's different, because this practice is never exercising force. I will never tell you, unless you tried, I do have a different practice that's more, that gets close to prescribing behavior, but otherwise T, I never prescribe behavior specifically. How you wake up, Gene, is how you wake up. Where you put your attention is where you put your, it's either deliberate or it's not. Like you can't hustle yourself, or you can try, but so this is the base of T. Does that make sense? The golden mean principle, this is all about balance. Suffering and attachment comes from existing in an extreme. And again, Buddha, if he's listening, sorry, but it's incomplete. To say that attachment is the source of suffering is incomplete, because attachment has a source. Existing, perpetuating in an extreme is the source of the imbalance. The imbalance is the source of the attachment. The attachment is then the source of the suffering. That suffering can help create the conditions for physical suffering, such as war and such as food shortages and stupid things that shouldn't be occurring. So this practice is built, so this is the base that the 3 pillars are on. And so now we have the 3 pillars, and that is here, here, and here. Okay, and Jerry, what is the first pillar? Picking on Jerry or Ida. Oh, no, I don't want to pick up. Jerry, I know you got notes. What's the first pillar of T? Goodness. Oh, maybe Jerry's not at. Oh, yeah. Okay, I was gonna say, like, maybe
Presence.
you never know. Oh, let's just use you then for the next 2, since you got the mic there. Presence, what's number 2?
Mindfulness.
You think that's one thing I could spell by now? My spelling gets better every day. But that means it's bad every day too, if it's getting better. If it's being improved upon, it means I'm improving upon something, which is poor spelling. And then what's the third pillar, Jerry?
Deliberate intent.
And I would clarify that deliberate intention is how I worded it in like 2017. I kind of just clarified it so that it's a little bit more clear. Although intention is not wrong, but attention. Because attention and intention, very similar, but I could talk about them just slightly differently. But yes, we're still describing something very similar, because where your attention is where your intention. Where the attention goes, the energy flows. And when the energy flows that direction, if we're talking about it that way, that is intention. Intention and will build the feeling that I call personal power. And then we have a new base from which to build. And my lines don't perfectly line up, but yeah. So the new base is called the background of attention. Does that make sense? And this is possible. And this is actually one of the reasons I am now ready to potentially, I haven't fully, again, there's no wrong choice for me. I'm going to do it or I'm not. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no win, there's no loss. I'm going to learn. So the bottom line, though, is that I do believe that we have officially replicated these results. I will not, in air quotes, teach something that I haven't seen it shared and replicated. And when I say replicated, I just mean peace. I don't mean they're doing what I'm doing, you know. Maybe Jerry's shoulder is like this right now. I don't know. It's fine if it is, but mine's not, because my elbows are tucked behind me. That's my practice. You can do whatever you want to do, and that's fine too. As long as it's on purpose, as long as it's deliberate, it will still have the same nature, because that's a principle. That's not Ernest's creation. Now, these three pillars, basically the three things, and I haven't even named this effectively, but I'll use a slightly different color. There are three results. And this is what we focus on in what I call seers training. And in seers training, there's very little to talk about. This is felt. So the seer is feeling their life more than thinking about it. I use the word seeing because there is a new perspective that occurs. That's why this practice is transcendental. And I can't talk to you about this that much. We can kind of chat. I can give examples, but this is one of the things that needs to be felt. This is just an accumulation of the practice. That's it. Nothing fancy. But Ida or Jerry or Shana, do you know what these three pillars are called? I think I should change the name, because I think if I call these pillars, that could get confusing. But I'm building the T practice here. So it's kind of a pyramid. Well, I'll just do these ones because they could be a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, I
This
can't
one?
remember. It's been a while since we talked about the pillars. But okay, now that you read it, I see it.
Oh, I can't read it through the blue. It's just going to be too long. So interestingly, we came into this world doing all three of these, but here we are.
I found my
Deliberate
note.
modulation.
I found my
Did you?
notes. Number 3, active allowing.
There you go. So active allowing in this sense is perpetuated flow. Everything is working out for you. But that doesn't mean space junk doesn't fall from the sky. It just means you didn't make it into a problem and you got out of the way. And you built the new house that's even better without turning it into a problem, without attempting to control. So it doesn't mean that we don't have anything to adapt to. So it doesn't mean that you're just sitting on a beach all day long, drinking pina coladas and Coronas with Tony Romo. I have no reason to believe that that leads to lasting peace anyway. So, but deliberate modulation, the seer can choose how they want to feel. And it is a matter of attention. So there are more and more people who have been practicing this long enough that they're starting to report this back to me. And so now I can see that this is teachable. It is shareable. It is information and experience leading to knowledge that you can share unto wisdom. You can express it unto wisdom yourself. Wisdom isn't shared. It's an expression of knowledge. If I express what I know, I was just wise. So no, wise isn't a condition. You know, I'm not the wise old man. It depends. Am I stepping in a pile of shit? Because that wasn't very wise. But if I'm the old man that's aware of the footstep and I go around, I just expressed some wisdom. So yeah, I even wisdom, I have a clear definition in the way that I use that word. So deliberate modulation, let me tell you some of the things that I choose. Timelessness. Now, these are the words that I'm learning to, or that I'm using to describe a feeling, but it's this feeling that attention itself has, but of, I don't know. Have you ever looked at like something mundane that seems mundane, like a lamppost, and then you're just looking at the lamppost and you're like, that lamppost is always there. Rain, sleet, snow, whether we're paying attention to it, there's that lamppost. Isn't that interesting that that lamppost is always there, whether we're paying attention to it or not, whether we're giving it our attention or not? And it's just this kind of timeless nature of how everything is always moving and changing. So there's a feeling of timelessness, and you may not know what the hell I'm talking about. I get it. I'm trying to describe a feeling which can be very tricky, but that's a feeling that I can choose like that. It is literally a matter of my attention. So how about I use a feeling that is more common? Happiness. Happiness is an emotional derivative. It is chemical, it is hormonal, it is a response. So am I happy all the time? No. If I touch a hot pan, I am not happy. If my dog transitions to something new, I am not happy, but I can still feel peace because I might not turn it into a cognitive kicking of myself in the face. I just touched a hot pan. I'm either going to learn or I'm not. My dog transitioned to something new. I can either turn that into a beautiful event of honoring his existence, or I can turn it into psychological suffering. That's my choice. And all of that is determined by the direction of my attention. So I may not be happy, but I will still feel peace, because peace is not an emotion. Peace is a state of being that arises when we're not kicking ourselves in the face cognitively. Does that make sense? Enlightenment is a feeling of a mind that is no longer encumbered. The problems aren't weighing you down. The world isn't weighing you down. Your own thought isn't weighing you down. And all of a sudden, it feels very light. It's like, hey, I can just smile. I can just enjoy the day. I can find humor. So some of the ancient philosophy should be coming to mind. We got a Buddha that's laughing with a big old belly. We're getting closer. So the idea is that I'm able to choose exactly how I want to feel, deliberate modulation, and I can sense the essence. That is the spirit of the thing. When I look at a mountain, I am not just seeing it. Have you ever seen White Man Can't Jump, the movie with Gene? You've seen White Man Can't Jump. So there's a part where, so you have Wesley Snipes, he is the African-American gentleman, and then you have Woody Harrelson, he's the white guy, and Woody Harrelson puts in Jimi Hendrix. And the Wesley Snipes character says, "What do you know about Jimmy? Like you don't really listen, or you don't really hear Jimmy. You just listen." And of course, Woody Harrelson got frustrated. He's like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Like, I listen, I hear, like, it's the same thing." It's not. It really isn't. If I am unconscious, I can still hear it, or I'm listening. Well, no, yeah, I don't know. I don't remember how he described it, because I'm borrowing this from Wesley Snipes, so bear with me. But the idea is that, I'm not really feeling Jimmy. That's what it was really getting into, is you're not able to feel the music because you're not really open to it. You're not creating space to let it move through you. You're doing something else with your mind, which is probably thinking about trying to jump or trying to dunk, or why he can't dunk, or why his girlfriend keeps wanting to leave him, and why he has this gambling problem throughout the movie. So he's probably thinking about all those things, and he's not really feeling Jimmy's music. And that's what he's talking about. So that's the bottom line. So the sensing essence, when I see a mountain, I don't just see it. I can feel it. And what does it feel like? I'd have to write a poem. I'd have to write a book, an entire book that just leads to the one feeling of how that mountain made me feel. Does that make sense? It can be a little bit of emotion. It is emotion. There's emotion involved. There's also state of being that's involved. And that's not necessarily hormonal. A state of being like peace has to do with our vibration. And I don't talk about vibration that much, because that can start to get a little bit cliche-y. We can get a little bit down that spiritual rabbit hole where all we do is talk about it. So vibration can be felt, and I call that state of being rather than emotion. And typically those are both occurring. If I'm in a peaceful state of being, I'm very likely feeling some emotional derivative from that. Probably some happiness, right? Typically. So I am able, and I say I am able, whoa, we're all able. Every single human being alive, outside of maybe some abnormal psychology where the brain structure is different. We all have this ability to sense essence. We've been doing it for the last 10,000 years. Natives are very adept at this. They gave themselves animal characteristics because it's the essence of the animal. Mantis Kung Fu takes the essence of the insect. That's what we're doing. That's what the idea is. You want to embody that animal and its essence. Does that make sense? Maybe kind of. Like, this is tough stuff to talk about, but so I am able to choose how I want to feel as a matter of attention. That's it. So I'm not trying to control how I feel. So Jerry, for example, if I eat too much ice cream before bed and I wake up feeling kind of meh, do I try to change meh?
No,
Why not?
because I'm not going to kick my own ass. I'm not going to leak power over
And
it.
it's changing already. Meh is changing. Upset is changing. Anger is, it's always changing. That's a fundamental, law of the universe that we experience, is that it's always moving and changing. So sadness will change to something. I just have to be deliberate with my attention, and it will change to something that's more in alignment. There's that word again, to the world around me. And I don't mean the drama in the world around you or the political climate around you. I mean the particles, the light, the essence around you is moving. When you choose to move with spirit, that's called flow. The optimal human condition is in flow. Whether it's a burst of flow, saving a baby from a burning building without thinking about it, Gene just rushes in, saves the baby, and rushes out. He had the expectation, the desire, and didn't need to think a single word about it. He just jumped into flow. Or we have what I call life flow, which is an elongated version. So think, when I look at the letter K, that is running into the burning building, focused. When I use my peripheral vision, that is a type of, and I'm comparing this to flow, it's a peripheral flow. It's like, oh, this painting is here because I put it there. This flannel shirt is because I chose to put this on because of my deliberate attention. Everything is on purpose. And then I look around, and everything that's within my ability to direct is on purpose. Maybe Gene comes over unannounced. That's not my creation. That's not my manifestation. That's Gene. He chose to come over unannounced. And now I got to adapt to that. Does that make sense? And then finally, and then I'll finish this up, we have the third, which is the act of allowing, and that's the perpetual flow. That's when we've given up trying to control, and I'm not trying to change my old spider's web. I'm not trying to reprogram it. I'm not interested in burning it down and shadow working it and going into why I created this rough patch of spider's web. I don't need to do that. Instead, the web that I create right now will be on purpose. It will be deliberate. It will be with the essence involved. And so I'll look back on my spider's web from the last 15 years. That's some pretty good web. I got Charlotte's Web written over here instead of, the hot mess that I was creating for the past 30 years. And so I end up with a web exactly how I chose it to be, because I'm paying attention to the moment and engaging with it. And then before you know it, the whole web is nice. And we've managed to even work through the old webbing by creating new webbing. That's using a spider and a spider's web as an analogy. And then that holds up the final thing. Everything sustains this. And it's like another new little, I'll make this one shaded blue. Okay, cool. And then that holds up this last blue block. And it's not deliberate modulation and sensing. But the last blue block is the result. And I hate to use the word result because it shouldn't be a result. It should just be the way that we are. Oh, hold on. That's it. That's T. So I have been very trepidatious in the past of saying, what will be the derivative of T? What can you expect if you really do and embody this practice? This will be the result. That's it. That's all I got. Right. The act of allowing, foundation, and a pillar. Mm-hmm. And then inner peace is it. Because if I'm in peace, I am aligned. I can feel inner peace plus excitement. I can feel inner peace plus, I don't know, what are things that we want to feel? Happiness, joy, creativity, excitement. I can feel those things and still feel peace. So peace is not an emotion. I can feel peace while feeling all of those other things. There becomes this underlining layer of peace, and it's being held up by the background trick of attention. And it takes practice. That's it. That's the only thing. We just have to do it. If we do it more, we'll get good at it. We'll become preferred. I feel icky if I don't have deliberate attention. If for some reason, and it doesn't happen often, but if it happened today, I would it would feel gross. It'd be like, oh, like I wasn't deliberate just a moment ago. Oh, I just looked like Eckhart Tolle right there. I just saw myself. I did an Eckhart Tolle kind of mannerism. Bless his heart. All right. So any question? Sorry, I thought Jerry might have something to say about that.
You
I
don't
love Eckhart
sound,
Tolle.
you don't sound like him though, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. At least not yet. Maybe that's what happens to us all. We just end up like Eckhart Tolle. No, I'm just kidding. I love Eckhart Tolle. Like his book is magical. No, if I met him, we would sit in silence, I'm sure, very, very nicely. But I do not want that man's posture. It's just my body. Stop. Oh, stop. Same thing with Deepak last week. Deepak was all up like this, and it's like, man, if you do your whole webinar like that, you're gonna be doing some counterbalance exercise. You're gonna need some yoga to get that shoulder down. Deepak wasn't sitting very deliberately, but I love him anyway. Great books, great guy. And if I met him, I'm sure we could sit in silence comfortably. That's all I want to do if I meet these people, is just sit. Like, we don't have to say anything.
But we don't necessarily know their practice. I mean, we do have the principle.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just joking.
For all we know, that's his, his alignment. I mean, what in the hell do we know?
I actually like Eckhart Tolle's chuckle too. Like when he does his little hee hee hee. I really like that. I ain't mad at it. And yeah, you're right. Like, I don't know Deepak's practice. Maybe he is already counterbalancing something. Maybe he woke up stiff, and this is what he's doing today on purpose. Woke up stiff today, so this is how I'm fixing it. I don't know.
Maybe he's got scoliosis. Who knows?
All right. So any questions, comments, or concerns about any of this? Now, anything? And then I'll just share this one more time. Well, no, not one more time. I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot. I did save this one though, Jerry, because I don't think you've ever put this one in your notes. And then Ida can probably make a nice visual representation of it, like a painting or something. But okay, so, and I typically draw this with a curve, because everything in the universe has an angular momentum or a curve to it, and I don't. Yeah, there's not very many straight lines in nature, but this is a pipe. Let's just look at this as a pipe. Okay, and water flows through this pipe. It flows this way. Well, let's just say it flows this way for now. Okay, so this is a pipe, and it's actually our mind. And the water flowing through it is the moment itself in this analogy. And then we have this thing that we call R, which is resistance. Resistance equals cognition. Any cognition that removes you from the present moment. And if you sustain that, if you are always in resistance, R in this analogy equals dirt. Sorry, dirt. I like dirt too. Dirt gets a bad rap. But if you add dirt to water, you get mud. And so in this analogy of our mind and the energy flowing through it, if we add cognitive resistance, this water does not flow very well. And it gets all jumbled up, and it's all bouncing around, and it's all muddy, and that is the common mind. That is a perfect analogy of what is occurring most commonly in the minds of the human species today. That cognitive resistance could look like, and society loves dressing up opposites as if one was good and one was bad, such as habit. Good habit versus bad habit. No, all habit is unconscious, conditioned behavior, and I don't want that in my life. I want deliberate awareness, conscious attention, vibrancy, and choice. Those are the things I want in my life. not habitual, repetitive acting and thinking. I am not just a brick in the wall. Thanks, Pink Floyd, but I'm a little bit more than that. I am the wall itself and everything else. So if I am thinking about getting a raise, or I'm thinking about not thinking, or I'm thinking about my spirituality, or I'm thinking about the importance of spirituality, or I'm thinking about this or that or the other thing, that is resistance. That is a form of cognitive resistance. And why is it resistance? Because you are no longer paying attention to the world around you in the same way. So the more that Mike thinks dumb shit, the easier I can sneak up on him, because he has become dumb, deaf, and blind to the world around him. When he's angry, any of us, not just him. I just chose Mike for this example. It's not like he's a raging, angry truck driver or anything. But if you're angry and you're in that anger, then that is mud. That is resistance. You are resisting the present moment. You are not engaging it. So the way that I'm using the word resistance is very clear. The way that other people use the word resistance, sometimes it means what just doesn't feel good. So if I get punched in the face, that's a form of resistance because it doesn't feel good. If I have to do the dishes and I don't want to, that's a form of, so I don't use the word quite that way. Resistance is not engaging the present moment. And we go away from that typically very unconsciously. If you do it on purpose, I call it cherry picking. If Jerry knows that existing in an extreme will cause suffering, but she chooses to anyway, that's cherry picking. You're actually going to really create some suffering because you're doing it on purpose now, basically. Does that make sense? And so that's what this practice is ultimately doing. By engaging the world around us on purpose, using tricks of attention, we disrupt cognitive resistance. I am not resisting the present moment because I am present. I am mindful, and I'm deliberately choosing where my mind is. If I deliberately choose where my mind is, then I maintain mindfulness and presence, and now I can maintain these three factors. The third pillar is all about maintaining and embodying. These are pillars, by the way, these X's. And if the three pillars are active and there's no resistance, the water just flows. And this water flowing is alignment. If you allow the water to flow, if you move with it, you are moving with it rather than against it. If you use your thought to point back to the present moment, if you use your thought to give your actions direction, then you're doing what Abraham Hicks has suggested. Then we're using our thought to create things. We're not just sitting there and thinking about it. If I sit here and think about the Heisman Trophy, it doesn't matter. I'm never going to get a Heisman. That's a collegiate football award. I have to play football to get the collegiate football award. But Ernest, it's just energy. And I have to play football to get the collegiate football award. That's the same as money. That's the same as a car. That's the same as a person. It's the same thing. Just thinking about it is not what Abraham or Esther, or if you want to go back even further, Napoleon Hill, that's not what they were talking about with the law of attraction. But thinking can help keep the direction of your attention going a certain way. And so we can use thought as a tool of creation. We're not doing that right now in the human experience. We're attaching to the thought. We're clinging to the thought. The thought is gross, disproportionately imbalanced. People are doing it all the time, hence the monkey mind. Does that make sense? Creating lots of mud to the point where the water's hardly moving at all. Like the flow and the connection, we need a vacation to get that water flowing. We need a weekend or a party or drugs or alcohol to get that water flowing. Does that make sense? And so, I mean, you could look at any of that. You could look at alcohol. Alcohol is not good or bad. I don't judge it. If you exist in an extreme, you will suffer. It's just guaranteed. Somehow, some way, you will suffer, or you'll create the conditions for suffering for other people. You die, now other people suffer over that. You killed yourself with alcoholism. Now other people around you, they feel unwell. So you help create the conditions for suffering for other people. Now their mind is still their responsibility. So I'm not saying you did it to them, but you helped create the conditions for it because of your actions. And that's what we're doing in the world collectively, is we're creating the conditions for psychological suffering on a global level. Does that make sense? And that's this whole practice. So alcohol, I don't declare war on alcohol. Drugs. If you shoot me, I'm going to want something powerful for my arm that has a hole in it. You know, I just got shot. Go ahead and give me some morphine or some Vicodin or something. I mean, I'm not just going to wish it away. Like, I just got shot. I'm not a monk. I didn't grow up in the Shaolin temples. I can't just think pain away. You know, I go ahead and give me something, and I'll be all right. And then I won't rely on it because I don't want it to exist in an extreme. But if you give me something for the pain, I'm probably going to take it. I'm not going to say, oh, what, you know, let's just go into this root canal old school. No, I want you to numb that shit up. And that's called balance. Not existing in an extreme, not declaring war, not going from one type of thinking to another type of thinking, thinking that the new thinking is somehow better thinking. It's still just thinking. Does that make sense? So drugs like cannabis. Cannabis can be used as a deliberate point of attention. And I highly recommend it that way. If a person, for example, if Gene took a 1-to-1 gummy that was 1 part THC, 1 part CBD, his body is going to light up. It's called his cannabinoid system, the endocannabinoid system. We have a whole system in our body that the teachers didn't tell us because it involved cannabis. They omitted that. It doesn't just involve cannabis. It's your regulation of homeostasis. So there's a lot that's going into the endocannabinoid system. So let's say Gene took a gummy. He was feeling a little pain because he drove all day. And he took a 1-to-1 CBD THC gummy. He can feel into his body, and we can feel them naturally too. That's right. But I'm not here to declare war. You know, maybe Gene has never sensed into his body a day in his life. So the 1-to-1 gummy can help. And he's like, whoa, like shit's lighting up. I can feel this is kind of probably a little interesting at first, but then maybe a little pleasurable. Now, if Gene starts to do it every day, all day, and he starts to rely on cannabis, it's a trap. He has violated the golden mean principle, and that will lead to suffering. Same with me. Same with any of the choices that I make. If I exist in an extreme, it will lead to suffering. That is the golden mean principle. And that's as old as Socrates' philosophies. All right, any questions? Because I think that's all. And so, Jerry, one of the things that we're probably going to be looking at soon, I'm going to open myself up to what I call mindfulness mentoring. I don't like the idea of coaching. I don't like the idea of having classes and teaching and curriculum, but I am going to start to open myself up to things like mindfulness mentoring, so I can do one-on-one sessions, because now we have a complete practice. You know, back in the day when I would do one-on-one sessions, I had to stop them because people wanted me to help them manifest a Ferrari, or they wanted me to help them find their soulmate or their twin flame. I don't know about that. Like, I don't know who your twin flame is or where they are. Like, that's not my business. I can tell you how to find connection, and with that connection, you can pay attention to the world around you. And if you pay attention to the world around you, you won't miss that twin flame when they come into your existence. You won't try to control the twin flame, which leads to problems in relationships. You'll allow them to exist. You'll collaborate rather than try to control. So I think that T could help you with your twin flame. T could help you with your soulmate. T can help you after you manifest a Ferrari so that you don't become an egotistical maniac who thinks that they're better than people because you have a car that can do 180. Does that make sense? So now we have a complete practice. I feel pretty authentic, and I feel really good about the way that we're offering things. So we're probably going to step this up a notch here as we go along over the rest of this year. So yeah, I'll keep you guys updated and posted. I'll change the website, Gene, so that it reflects the Sunday podcast. So we have the Sunday podcast at 6:15. Tomorrow at 7 a.m., I'll do another free workshop. Moving forward, we're going to have a very strong free model. I'm not really looking for revenue. I have to have a little bit to pay for the website, to pay for certain things, and that's going with rather than against. So it's not existing in either extreme. I'm not looking to be a billionaire. I'm also not looking to go dead broke, because then I can't necessarily do some of the things I'm doing now in the way that I'm doing them. So yeah, there'll be a balance between the two, if that makes sense. All right, so 3 pillars. We're going about the rest of our day. I know where my mind will be because I have it written down on a note card. I call it hydrostasy. I'll pay attention to the feeling of balance. I can feel balance and peace. So Gene, you've been out of balance before physically, right? Like you're about to fall over. Doesn't that, and then maybe you regained your balance and you're like, oh, I almost fell off that cliff. That felt differently. The feeling of about to fall felt very differently than I am now back on solid ground. So that's just a very generic way of looking that peace has a feeling. So does this balance, and I call this balance the hydrostasy effect. If you want an example of hydrostasy or hydrostatic, look at the sun. The sun is an example of balance. There is expanding pressure because of the atoms hitting each other very hard. And there's also a collapsing type of force, and that's because they have mass, and that's called gravity. And so gravity is going in, the nuclear fusion is going out, and it creates a balance. That is why we're here. It has given us life and power. So that's an example of hydrostasy. All right, any questions, comments, or concerns before we head out?
What kind of workshop there is tomorrow? Is it like for everyone or?
For everyone. Yep. Yep, of course. Yep, for everyone, and it's free. It's the same time. It's basically like what we did today. I'm just going to get out of order. So I might go into a particular topic. I have a couple on the tip of my mind, and I haven't really chosen which one I want to do yet. But it'll be related to tea and everything else. So it'll still fit in really well. And I feel like after today, like, just rewatch this video. There's really not a whole lot more teaching involved other than this: presence, mindfulness, deliberate intention, tricks of attention. Where is your mind? Did you put it there? That's really it. We can talk about this in 10 million different ways, but really, it really just does come back to attention, and is it placed on purpose? And that act is never force. You can't have too much of being who you are. Like, you are attention. So you can never direct your attention deliberately too much. That doesn't even make sense.
I'll never have too much class. It's just not going to happen.
Oh, I don't know. That could become an extreme. If you started watching class all day, every day, then you would start to notice other aspects of your life could start to suffer. Maybe your husband doesn't want to watch tea all day, every day.
Well,
See what I mean?
You're adding something to it. I never said all day.
I did, yeah. That's true, yeah. You can't do tea too much. That's true. Or I agree. I don't like the words that's true. I agree. All right, so I'll let you know, Sonia. If we're Facebook friends, I'll invite you to the group, and it's really just a communication thing. It's not, it's not a cultish type of affair. I promise.
We're not, but I have a completely different name there, so it's just like some nickname. But I'll just add you.
Yeah, just send me a friend request, and then I'll add you to the group, and then that way, if I have to cancel something or something like that, you can have an idea or a heads up of what's going on. If at any point tea just isn't for you, then you can just leave the group or whatever. It's not it's not a blood oath or anything like that. Yeah. All right. Well, I will see you guys tomorrow, 7 a.m. We'll have a little bit of a workshop. So maybe tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about the rings of power. I think so the rings of power is just it is tea. Like it's everything tea. It's just a different way of explaining the entire tea practice. And it's another thing that you could do. So it's not just more philosophy. That's why I like the Rings of Power. But maybe tomorrow we'll give a full overview of the Rings of Power, and then that can be a great complement to a tea practice. Okay, so that's what we'll do tomorrow. I just made that up, but that's what we'll do tomorrow. We'll do a workshop on the Rings of Power again. Does that sound good? Okay.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sounds good. Excellent.
Sweet. All right, great. Yep, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye.
See you.